Hello, everyone, and welcome to our big Ask Me Anything-a-thon with Monte Cook, my delightful prisoner here. And I will be your question asker, Darcy Ross. I'm the Community Relations Coordinator of Monte Cook Games. And welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks everybody. It's good to be here. Now we'll see how I feel when we're on question number 87 or whatever.
Yeah, the tides may turn. We will see. So, how this is going to work? We are doing this partly to torture our dear friend Monty here, and partly to get hype for your best game ever, which is a Kickstarter we're running to create a tool book, a book of tools and resources for all gamers of role playing games, whether you're a GM, whether you're a player, whether you're new or experienced. And so this Ask Me Anything is sort of us opening the doors to, not just our deep love of the Cypher system and Invisible Sun, but, Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder and the experiences of being a gamer generally. So this is your chance to ask Monty anything. So how this is going to go. We are going to start with a couple questions we've been gathering from people who have submitted beforehand. And so we've got about 12 of those. And during that time, you should be messaging us in chat and giving us your questions. If you're a backer, put your backer number so we know to sort of, prioritize you a little. Thank you for helping us with your best game ever. And after we get through the first round of questions with Monty, we will start adding questions to his queue. So the more backers we get at your best game ever, the more questions. Each new backer will be another question I get to ask Monty. So if you wouldn't mind sharing the word, spread the word about this AMA, spread the word about the Kickstarter. And, if you're just learning about your best game ever or Cypher system, we welcome you. Come check it out. And, if you have questions in the chat, I'm sure lots of our great fans will be able to help you out. So ask us your questions. Go back the Kickstarter or tell a friend too, so we'll be here a while. And if we're here long enough, we will bring on special guests to relieve Monty of this onerous task I'm about to put him through. So if you're really excited for people like Ajit George or Janelle Jacquez or Tanya DePass and Tom Lommel, spread the word. We're really excited to have them on. So hopefully we're here long enough to have to bring in our ringers, right? Hello, everybody.
The more backers we get, the more questions I'm going to answer. So
Exactly.
tell all your friends and some of your enemies.
All right, we already have one above where we started. So good work, guys. I'm dropping a link to the Kickstarter, and we are going to launch into this. So, nice. Monty, my friend, we're going to start with a question that, you're a GM a lot. I've gotten to have you as a player in my game, which was delightful. But you've GM'd such a wide variety of experiences. We have a question about, as a GM, what's something that a player in your game could do or does to make the game really interesting for you?
Oh, okay. Well, that's a really good question. It's hard to narrow that down to just one. I think that there's a lot of things that a player can do. And this is one of the topics that we're going to cover really heavily, actually, in your best game ever. We're going to have a lot of player-focused advice, and really, I think that a lot of people, when they sit down to play an RPG, they kind of say, well, let's see what the GM has in store for us this week, right?
Right.
When I sit down to play an RPG, I say, I wonder what the players have in store for me this week. I like to very much turn the tables on that. And so what I love is to see players who are really engaged with the game, with the setting, who bring things to the table, right? Who aren't just passive and sit back and say, well, I'm going to wait for the GM to dangle some hook, that tugs me along or gets me on this railroad. I instead love to see players who come ready and say, I want to do this thing, right? I want to, we heard about this, King of the Lizard Man last week, and I want to go find this guy and see if he's got any treasure or whatever, right? Whatever the thing is. That's great. And but I'm also going to add some other stuff because there's just so many. Bringing a character into the game, right, is sort of the player's responsibility, right? The GM brings a presumably a setting, and maybe the beginning of a storyline, and the player brings a character. And so the more the player is able to create a character that is interesting,
Mm,
unique, and has the ability to sort of engage with the setting. Somebody who, if I've created this world where there's this alien race, and they're interacting with humankind and whatnot, and you bring to the table a character that has had an experience with that alien race in the past or whatever, then you're telling me, oh, you actually paid attention, right? You already understand a little bit of the setting, and you're engaging with it, right? You're
mm.
jumping right in with both feet. And so I love that kind of thing. And I'm also going to give a shout out to my longtime friend and gamer cohort, Bruce Cordell. I've always said that I love to have Bruce in my games, and he will always get an invite to every campaign that I run. And the reason for that is that Bruce is that player who always wants to know what's behind the door,
Ooh,
right? And so that makes GMing so easy, right?
yeah.
Because if you just put something tantalizing behind, a closed door or whatever, right? Whatever that, however you want to extend that metaphor, um, that curiosity, right? That willingness, that desire to find out more, is going to just fuel the whole campaign.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard on the flip side with sort of the GM end, you mentioned how a player that I've heard the metaphor of sort of a character sheet as a love letter, to the GM. Here's what I love. Here's what I want to see. So it's great when there's enough for me on your character sheet. I can see what you want out of the game, right? I can see what you're curious about, and I can build that around it. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
All right, we're just gonna keep hopping around. I know I will be tempted to like dig into all of these, but this is an AMA of Monty, so we're gonna do it. All right.
Okay,
So,
let's do it.
what are your best tips for sharing responsibility at the table among the players? How do you distribute that, and how can you make that
That's
go
another great
smoothly?
question. And again, I'm going to keep plugging. It really applies to your best game ever, because, so much of the time, I think we think of things, uh, problems that come up, or, even so, hosting the game, or, we put
Yeah.
all of that on the GM. And I don't know how that started, but it certainly has been around since I've been gaming. It just, like, the responsibility for everything just goes to the GM, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's wrong, right? It's a group activity, and so a lot of the things that we talk about that a game needs, the responsibilities for that should go to a player, you know, like hosting, right? Like, I would say, in my opinion, unless the GM is the kind of person who will be more comfortable GMing, in their space, right? In their apartment, their house,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I would say that the GM should never be the host, right? It's too much, right? It's too
Yeah.
much to put on one person. Um, and, uh, I would say that, like, if problems arise, that a player can just as easily sort of intervene. If you've got, the go-to example that I keep going back to is the player who uh, tries to tell the other players what to do, right?
Yeah.
And like what abilities to use or whatever. And that is not a GM issue, right? Like, GM, there are plenty of problem player GM issues that a GM does have to deal with, because it's how they are interfacing with the GM.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's a player on player sort of issue, then I think the players ought to be the ones to resolve it. And like, another great one is, if somebody around the table looks like they're being excluded,
Mm.
they're quiet, they're not engaging with the game very much, sometimes I think it's actually more powerful if another player says something to that player, like, hey, Darcy, you haven't said anything in a while. What is your character
Yeah.
doing? Right. That is really a cool thing for another player to do rather than putting that onus on the GM. I think it makes it seem, sometimes when the GM says something to a player, it can have too much weight behind it, I think. But if it's another player, it doesn't have as much weight, and so you can more easily, sort of more in a friendlier
It's a
way.
nudge.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's lots of things that a player can do to take on the responsibilities of everything that needs to be done to have a great game.
Yeah, if you're a GM, do you have any advice for like how to start getting your players to do that? Is it, would that be like just a straight up conversation you'd have, or is there anything more advanced than that of like, hey
Well,
guys, yeah.
you could have them read your best game ever when it comes
It's true. Yeah.
out.
I think it was kind of a light bulb after I started GMing that like I could do that as a player, right? Until I started GMing, I didn't even think about the oh, I haven't seen Spotlight over there. I legitimately am curious. What are you doing over there? Would you like to be more engaged? That's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's tough sometimes to be a GM and then become a player,
Mm.
because sometimes I know, particularly in the past, when I've seen that situation that you're just describing,
Mm-hmm.
I've been hesitant, right? Because I fall into the same trap that everyone else does. Oh well, it's not my game, right?
Right.
But of course it's my game, right? It's everybody around the table's game. And so, if you see something, say something, right? Right?
You heard it here first, folks.
If you see something that needs doing, like helping out another player, maybe it's just something as simple as, another player just kind of is new to the game system and they're not quite grokking it all. Don't wait for the GM
Yeah.
to be sort of also in top of everything else, the teacher of the rules. Help them out.
Yeah. All right, so this is painting a beautiful picture of how everything's supposed to go, and it's great, and the players are really helping the GM. So let's flip that on its side, and we have a question about, um, let's see, what are your go-to tricks for when things go totally off the rails as a GM? So when your players have done something you never would have predicted, things have really taken a turn and totally gone away from any of your prep. What's your trick for sort of, and maybe that's a like lack of focus too, right? How do you get things running again?
Yeah, I mean, it probably really depends, right? If it's just things are off the rails, right? And
Mm,
suddenly, the players have gone to a completely different planet than I even thought they were going to go to. Um, the advice that I always give people, and that I've taken myself a few times, is take a break.
mm.
Take a 5-minute break. Have everybody, go use the restroom and grab a snack or whatever. And while that's happening, just kind of give it some thought, rather than trying to deal with it right there in the heat of the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that really helps, and nobody minds, right? That's totally fine. In fact, sort of instituting a group break is probably a good idea anyway, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise you have people kind of coming and going from the table, and it makes chaos. But if you kind of lay out from the beginning, hey, everybody, at 8 o'clock we're going to take a 10-minute break, then everybody knows that they can just wait until 8.
Yeah.
But uh you know but there's different ways for things to go off the rails, right? Sometimes things just get bogged down, and the players are investigating down an avenue that
Yeah.
interesting, and whatnot. And it was the writer, Raymond Chandler, who said, when in doubt, have a man enter the room with a gun. And it's not terrible RPG advice, right? I mean, you don't want to use that, you don't want to play that card too often, but interjecting something that is
Mm.
surprising and possibly threatening, It doesn't have to literally be a man with a gun. It doesn't literally have to be violence, right? It can
Yeah.
just be, you
Surprise.
know, surprise, yeah, yeah, or even just something that you value is suddenly threatened, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, the house is on fire or whatever, right? I think that can shake things up. It can make everybody focus onto one thing again, and it can kind of jumpstart and get things moving. There's probably also one thing that I will say, and this is probably like really advanced GMing. This isn't GMing 101. This is like GMing 401, you know.
Okay.
Um, but there's a crazy thing that you can do, and that is do a time jump.
Ooh.
Just suddenly tell everybody,
Dang.
okay, it's 3 weeks later, and and where what's happened, and then you kind of put the onus on them. What's happened in the last 3 weeks? And it suddenly kind of resets everything.
Yeah.
It refocuses, gets people thinking about things, you know, because if you're in the middle of some bogged down thing where, I don't know, you're in town and everyone's going in a different direction,
Yeah.
and you know, somebody's trying to start a fight in the bar and whatever, right?
Yeah.
Uh, that kind of dramatic time shift, I mean, it's the kind of thing that happens in books or movies all the time, right? And you know, where you just kind of do a scene cut, right? If it was Star
Yeah.
Wars, there would be some
A
weird
wipe.
thing, raw wipe, yeah, yeah. um and then just start everything fresh, and then go from there.
Oh man. Yeah. I really want to use that now. I've never tried that. That's amazing, but also feels next level. Dang.
Well, you know, it's the kind of thing that, like, the first time you do something like that, your players are going to go, "What? No, we were in the middle of that bar fight." And you're like, "Well, okay, that was 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. How did
How
it
did that
go?
go?"
At the
Right.
How did it end? So we can get
Right.
on to the next thing.
Yeah,
Uh
exactly. Because everyone else is really bored and they don't want to be a part of your bar fight, right?
yeah. Oh man, those are some good tricks. I feel like I run a lot of adventures, the same, similar adventures over and over again, and so I start to learn the intrusion, the narrative surprise that really works for this adventure, and I like keep those in my back pocket at all times.
That works really well. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, really, I mean, that's part of the genesis of the GM intrusion in the Cypher system, right?
Mm,
Is the GM's ability to just, you know, have Chandler's man with a gun come in, right?
right, and have the players be excited by it, right?
Yeah.
There was someone in chat talking about a player who had just written this enormous pages of backstory, and you get those players who are really really deeply engaged with the game. Whether they've written a novel or whether they've written just their stats, do you have any tips for game masters for how to get more mileage out of a character's backstory?
Oh man. Well, you know, my first inclination is to say, um, make them do it. Um, which
Mm,
is which is to say, uh, you know, so I've done a little bit of improv, right?
mm,
Like stage improv, and the key to stage improv, right, is the yes and, right? Somebody says something, you agree with it, and you build on it.
mm-hmm.
Um, and one of the things that you can do as a GM uh, is take the character's backstory and build on it. But you can also kind of turn it back on them and make it into a question. You can say, oh, I see that your mother was a great blacksmith and made magical swords back in the day. What's the greatest sword that she ever made, right? What was the name of it, and what was its powers, right? And then you have the player kind of fill in those blanks, and then that sword becomes important in the campaign, right? That
Yeah.
um and so it becomes a give and take. You're building on what they've given, because really, I mean, they're already doing that, right? You created a setting, and now they're building on it by putting a character in that setting, so you can you can continue to build on it. And it doesn't have to be a question either, right? Maybe you want to say, oh yes, well, your mother, the blacksmith, she disappeared under mysterious circumstances 3 months ago,
Yeah.
and I don't know what happened to her. But you can still then put, because you can still say, what have you been doing to try to find her, or have
Yeah.
you been? Do you even want to find her? So you can, kind of do that sort of thing, where you're doing it as a back and forth. I also think though, like I kind of started saying, right, make them do it, which is to say, as the game goes on, if you've made a character who is a native of a particular big city, and you are, the all the player characters are in that big city, make them, where's the cool hangout spot, right?
Yeah.
You're from here.
Talk.
It's part of your character background, right? Tell us where the cool club is to go to, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and I like how you're listing ways that even when you have something bad happen related to their character, background, like, your mother, the blacksmith, went missing, you're still
Right.
you usually tie that with an empowering thing, right? Of like, what have you been doing to fix it? I feel like, yeah, I really like a give and take of, have them hurt because of their backstory, but also have them be empowered by it, and have them be able to name the cool local hangout. As a player, I love that. So,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. And it
Yeah, me
like,
too. Me too.
yeah,
It is. You're right. Empowering is a good word. It feels good. It feels you become more invested, I think, as a player when you've got that power.
mm,
Some, and every GM is different, right? Some GMs probably don't want to go that far
yeah,
with their narrative control, and that's fine, right? But I guess I would encourage everybody to, like, at least give it a try. You'll
yeah,
actually find that it doesn't hurt so much to give somebody else that ability.
yeah,
And I think what people are afraid of, I think there's this idea that GMs want to create a world that feels very real, right?
mm,
That and so they have all the answers to all the questions, so they know where the cool, the GM is supposed to know the cool hangout spot in the big city, and by giving that to the player, I think some people think that that's showing weakness,
mm,
and that the problem is that then the players will feel like the place isn't real because they had to make up the cool club. But
right.
it's just the opposite is true, right? It's going to feel more real because I imagined this club and now we are in it. And so it comes from my imagination, and now everyone is sharing in that. It actually is a way to make things feel more real, not less.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've heard people get squeamish about it when they're like, "Oh, if the as a player, I know if I'm describing something that isn't important," and like that's never the case, right? Anything my players give me becomes important, right? That secret I wanted to hide in a location is now in that place, right? There's
Right.
still that's a great point about it does make it more real, I think. Yeah, definitely try that at home. I highly recommend yes and in addition to no but. If
Right.
things are too wacky, no but can kind of steer you closer.
Right.
I always love that. Okay, more questions, and we've gotten I think six more questions after this first volley. So people
We
keep
had
sharing the
6 new
Kickstarter.
backers.
Yeah, that's
Ooh,
awesome. Thank you so much,
cool.
people,
I am
and
going to be
welcome.
here a while.
Yeah, and we have some really good questions, and we have some really zany questions. I'm gonna pepper a zany one in here.
Go for it.
Okay, this is from Marcy Vellin. Monty, how many dice have you tried to fit in your mouth? And I assume at one time, not cumulatively over your life experience. So,
Wow. So here's the thing. I'm not orally fixated that way. I'm not always, I'm not one of those people that chews on pencils. So I
mm,
haven't put a lot of dice in my mouth. I probably have. I mean, I've been gaming for 40 years. I probably have put dice in my
Somewhere
mouth
in there.
at some point.
uh,
I'm sure for some reason. But here's what I do. I
ooh.
do. And this was actually a habit that I had to kind of break myself from because I
Mm.
think it was really distracting and annoying.
Hmm.
I'm a dice spinner. Right.
Ooh.
I've found that particularly like 10-siders, if you twirl them right on the table, right, you can spin them like tops. And I'll start like three or four of them going at the once, and I'm
Oh my
you know,
gosh.
and it's horribly distracting. It's one of those habits that you don't want to do at the table, right? Because
Oh,
it's like
yeah.
another. I used to have someone in a game who was a dice stacker,
Oh, yeah.
and make like these tall towers of d6s and then start adding like d12s and stuff. um, and of course it's going to fall, and scatter dice all over
Oh
everything,
gosh, yeah.
disrupt the game. And yeah, just I would say don't do
You heard it here first.
it.
Oh, that's great. Awesome. Let's see. I have another question. Tell us a story, and this one's very near and dear to my heart. Tell us one of your favorite stories from when you worked on Planescape. I've got all my Planescape books here.
Yeah. Oh man. um right, so Planescape was 20 some years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so Planescape was really cool, for a lot of reasons. And I mean, from it was cool to work on, because it was really different than anything that TSR had done, or really mostly anybody had done before, but particularly different from what TSR had done before. And you know, like one of the things that I remember about most about Planescape is it was the very first week that I worked at TSR, and new products would come out on Fridays, and and everybody got a copy of everything. And it was the Friday of my very first week that the person whose responsibility it was to come around and hand out product handed me a Planescape box set. And because I was brand new, I didn't know it was coming, I didn't know what
Mm-hmm.
it was going to be, and I was just utterly blown away by it. But the Planescape team like was sort of this core group of people, and I'm referring to like Ray Valise, Colin McComb, Michelle Carter. The creative director was Andrea Hayday, and there were a lot of other people that worked on it a lot too. Wolfgang Bauer,
Mm-hmm.
and of course the original designer was Zeb Cook, who he and I used to joke that he was my dad, but he's not my dad. There's no relation. Um,
Or is there?
that we know of. No, I don't even know what that means. Um, but okay, so a great Planescape story. So here's a funny Planescape story. I'm sorry, this is getting really long.
I'm excited.
So my cube was next to Ray Valise's cubicle. He was my editor on everything back then, and still works with us today at Monte Cook Games. And so what Ray and I had a good jillion action figures,
Oh God.
and we would set them up in these weird zany scenes in his office that would sort of progress over time. So that we would like the scenes would slowly change so to create a story. And they were silly, and like none of the action figures were actually the people that they really represented.
Uh-huh.
And so they all had different voices than they would normally have. But so like I would go into Ray's cube and I would set up a scene, and then I would describe it for the rest of the team, and everyone would laugh, and then Colin would do it, and then Ray would do it, and we would tell these progressive stories. And the reason I'm saying all of this is because one of the characters, um, one of the action figures that we had, was this kind of monstrous demon thing that I think was like the villain in the Spawn comic books.
Oh.
I think it was like Violator or some
Jeez.
very 90s kind
Oh
of
yeah.
extreme kind of villain, right? And we uh in our little tableau, we called him Barnalator, because what we did was we made him like Barney from The Simpsons, right? He was always drunk, he was kind of stupid, and he was belching a lot. And he was the funniest character. He always had a funny line in these little stories that we would have. He would always have like the final line that would show that he has no idea what's going on, right?
Oh man.
Um, well, the reason that this is all pertinent to Planescape fans is that we put Barnalator into Planescape, and that is so there's a type of Yugoloth, like the most powerful, terrible type of Yugoloth is called the Barnaloth, and Barnaloths come from Barnalator, and so in our minds, right, they're all talking like Barney from The Simpsons, and they're all drunk and belching.
Oh my god!
And whatnot. But in everyone else's regular Planescape campaign, there are these horrible puppet masters of evil that are behind everything. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh. I need to go find art of that. I assume it exists.
It does. And, you know, if you look at it right and you know who Violator is from the Spawn comics, you totally can see you can see it.
Chat, go find those pictures. That's amazing. Oh my gosh. We'll have to have...
that was a long story, but...
But also deep secrets of Planescape. I'm so excited. All right, let's hop back into more questions. So I believe we're on question 7 now. We have, let's see, we've gotten 7 questions that will be appending at the end of this volley. So keep sharing that Kickstarter because I have, you know, many, many more than that you've submitted to me. So thank you, everybody. What is like a one-shot story that you want to run that you haven't yet? So not just a system, but like a kind of game, a kind of murder mystery. Like what's your game you really want to run that you haven't yet?
Yeah. I would like to have done more just straight up murder mysteries. The one time that I did that, it was a fantastic game session. Ooh. It was one of those situations where like the people who normally weren't in that particular group, who weren't normally very engaged with the game, the kind of guy who's sort of always looking over your shoulder at the TV that's on in the next room kind of guy, like the murder mystery thing just totally engaged those people in a really interesting way. And, you know, I kind of want to explore that sometime of why that is. And, you know, because we talk about the different kinds of gamers, but I think that there's also different kinds of gamers and the way they engage with different kinds of stories. But anyway, that's not the answer to your question because I have done the murder mystery. What kind of, you know, here's actually the game that I have tried to run multiple times and it's never really worked out. And that is the sort of straight up heist game.
Oh, cool.
Right. Ocean's 11 kind of thing. Like here's my GM dream, and that is showing up at the table saying, okay, there's a thing and it's, you know, in this high-rise building. Here's like all the guards and the security and the, you know, locks and everything. You really want that thing. What do you do?
Awesome.
Right. And just put it all on the players. And that's actually why it hasn't ever really worked. Because I think people get very intimidated because, you know, I am a big fan of heist movies and that kind of thing. And I think, you know, the thing about heist movies is that everyone is super smart and really, you know, talented and good at what they do. And I think that, you know, RPGs have this sort of thing that where the group kind of falls into about joking about how they're terrible at everything that they do. You know, I think we've all experienced that, right? Like, you know, people get very self-deprecating, and I think it's because they're afraid of that responsibility, or that, you know, it's just intimidating, right? We have to come up with a way to break into this building. I don't know how to break into buildings, right?
My character does, but how am I supposed to tell you?
Right. It's actually so in the Cypher System rulebook, there is a rule called Insights, and where you can pay some points and get an insight from the GM. And that's actually where that comes from, is, you know, that bit of information that your character would realize that you as a player never would, right? And so, oh, the guards, you know, when they make their rounds, there's a 30-second window when no one is looking in this particular one hallway, right? That's the kind of thing that an insight would give you.
Yeah.
And as a player, you know, you're not going to think of that. You know, because the thing about heist movies is that the challenges and the solutions to those challenges are all created by the same writer, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, in a group experience, it's a little bit harder. So the way, if there's a way that the GM can kind of feed that in an appropriate way to the players, whatever game you're playing, I think that that's the way to make that work. And, you know, and I've had experiences in games where, you know, we had one sort of in The Raven Wants What You Have, the Invisible Sun game that we streamed, that you were a part of, Darcy, where it sort of was a heist where you got into the building to go talk to the Everdying goddess. But it still wasn't, I mean, I still long for that, you know, kind of put everything on the players. What do you do?
Yeah, like all the stakes are riding on this, you know, kind of built around that. People in chat were reminding us, they were like, Gamrose Tower, great heist. So thank you for watching The Raven Wants What You Have. Makes us so happy. Awesome. So, okay, let's keep that in mind. Maybe we can, I would love to have you stream your next big heist experience if you get around to it. So
that would be great, right? And particularly great because talk about a low prep game. All you have to do is just sort of have a place to break into and figure out ahead of time the problems, you know, the challenges.
Some problems to throw.
And then it's just sit back and let the players figure it all out, right?
If we do Numenera, I want to rob an Aeon Priest enclave.
Nice.
That's what I want.
Cool.
Keep that in your noggin.
We'll call that Aeon's 11.
Ooh. Don't say it unless you mean it, Monty. Gosh. Okay. I'm so excited. All right, more questions. What and especially as we're talking about this, I do not, you know, we play online games together most of the time. So do you have any advice for things to think about as a player for online gaming, you know, if you're coming from in-person tabletop gaming? Like what tips would you have for players who are just entering the online gaming sphere?
Right. So I did write a little bit about this. It's on the MCG website. And just recently, a couple weeks ago. But I think first and foremost, you have to recognize that playing online it presents some challenges that you don't have if everyone is just sitting in the same room. And so the mistake there is to just play a game the way you would play it if everyone was in the same room, right? And so the way I described it in the article, and I'll reiterate it here, right, is the best way to think of it, I think, is that there's an extra barrier, right? It's like, you know, that really, really old John Travolta movie, The Boy in the Bubble. It's like everyone is like in a bubble, right?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, right, there's a little bit of distance, there's a little bit of disconnect. You know, people can't necessarily maybe see all of your body language, you know, but there's also just like, even as I'm sitting in a room by myself, right, and I'm looking around, and if we were playing a game, there's like all these distractions, and I mean, and there's always distractions in a game, even if you're all in the same room, but somehow the fact that everyone has different distractions, right, like, you know, somebody gets a phone call, or, you know, somebody's child, you know, comes up and needs to ask a question, and suddenly they turn away from the camera, right, and that somehow that's way more distancing than if it was actually happening in real, right, because you're not a part of it anymore. Right, it's almost like you disappeared for a bit, and that's a real challenge. And so always keeping that in mind, it actually probably means that as a player in an online game, you need to be more attentive,
Yeah.
more attention to what's going on, or else the game's going to get potentially really bogged down because everyone's going to keep asking, okay, so what's going on?
Yeah.
And I would say another tip is like that idea of the break that we talked about just
Yeah.
a few minutes ago. I think it's required if you're playing an online game. I think
Ooh.
like if you're there for more than 2 hours, everybody needs to be able to like look away from a screen,
Yeah.
get up and move around, get a snack or a drink or whatever, use the bathroom, but just sort of like disengage a little bit because it's just such a different experience, right? I mean, humans have developed over the last hundreds of thousands of years to know how to interact with each other all in the same room. Interacting
Yeah.
via a screen is just it's a different thing, and it feels like I don't want to come down negative on online gaming because I love it and I do it every week.
Yeah.
But we just have to recognize that it's different. It's the same way that like chatting with your friends on social media is different than chatting with your friends, in a restaurant or whatever. It's just a different experience, and you have to recognize that. I think the only other thing that I'll throw out there is think of different ways to use visuals when you're because you've got everybody sort of focused so much on their screen and whatnot. It is prime time to show people cool things. And so if you're the GM, find some cool art online or in an art book that you have or in the role-playing game that you have, and utilize that art and say, you see this, right? If you're a player, hey, see this cool illustration, in this rule book? That's my character right there. And this place over here, that's my house. That kind of thing helps bridge that gap, right? In a way that you sometimes don't need to if you're all sitting around the table, right? Like, there's just something about almost every game that I've ever run, there's been a doodler in the game, right? And sometimes, I've been fortunate enough that they were like a professional artist doodler and, making fantastic illustrations. But sometimes, it's just somebody who likes to doodle. And it becomes a fun thing for everyone to see the doodles or at least kind of be aware of it or whatever. But if you're playing online, you might not see that, right? So every once in a while, if you're a doodler, right, hold it up and say, this is what, the GM just described is this weird monster, right? And here's my drawing of it. And everyone, it's engaging, it's fun, it's visual.
Man, I wish I was a good doodler. I definitely do I'm doing a physical motion to like, it helps me keep engaged somehow. It's just a little thing I have, but I cannot draw at all.
Yeah, I used to think that I could draw, and then I met people who really could draw, and I realized, okay, well, maybe I'll write instead.
There we go. We're glad you did. Okay, I'm throwing in another silly one here. So we're on question number 9, and people in chat are ravenous to hear you weigh in on pants. Are they required during online gaming? Sub question, are they ever required?
Well, here's the drawback to the no pants with online gaming. And that is what we just said a minute ago, which was the break.
Taking a break. Yes.
When you stand up, hopefully you're wearing something.
Oh my goodness. Or when your cat knocks down everything behind you and you have to get up to fix it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess that answers are they ever required? If you're going to be on camera, Monty recommends you are wearing some sort of below the waist garment, let's say.
I think so. I think so, yes.
Pants might be a strong word. I'm in a skirt.
The game. No judgment.
There we go. Awesome. Another question. When you were a player, what's one of the most surprising things a GM has ever pulled on you? or done it to you like in your game?
I have a great story.
Ooh.
Um, back right after the right after third edition D&D was launched, I was working at Wizards of the Coast, and it was a third edition game, and it was run by Chris Perkins,
Mm.
who still works at Wizards of the Coast. Fantastic game master, probably one of the best game masters that I've ever had. And I have never been so suckered by a GM as this time when I'm trying to remember. Most of the details don't really matter, but the issue at hand was there was a Medusa who was a real major villain in this
Mm-hmm.
part of the campaign and had a lot of servants, and we were dealing with these different plots and stuff that she was engaged in, and um, we finally had sort of cornered her in, if I remember correctly, it was like a ruined city, and it was underground, right? It was like some old Duergar city or something.
Yes.
And um, there was an NPC with us, and the NPC was this dwarf, and also really had it in for this Medusa. And so, we're searching and we're doing all these things. And Chris really let this go on for a long time where we were searching and searching and not finding this
Yeah.
Medusa. And we were, I mean, he was so smart in that he let it get frustrating, right?
Yeah.
And I'm the kind of player who I get frustrated kind of fast.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I was just like, I, where is she? We've looked everywhere, and I'm
Yeah.
so mad, right? And so I'm talking to the NPC dwarf. Some of you can probably see where this is going, right? And I'm talking to the NPC dwarf, and I'm like, oh, where is she? We can't find her. And that is when the Medusa, who was in the shape of this dwarf, suddenly took on her real appearance, right? And she just said, I'm right here, right? And of course, I failed my saving throw. I get petrified. But, I felt uh, like when we rolled the saving throw for real, but I kind of wanted to fail that saving throw, as weird as that sounds,
Yeah.
because like my character, I was so hoodwinked, right? And I was, I even just said, I was just, looking at this guy right in the face and ranting at him
Yeah.
why we couldn't find this Medusa. And so, I mean, it's just the perfect situation of I was already looking right in his eyes, right?
Yes.
So that was great. And the key there was knowing, like, because frustration is one of those things where as a GM you want to avoid it, right? Because it's not pleasant, it's not fun.
Right.
But he used that. Right. He knew exactly how far to push. I think specifically me. I sort of feel like this whole thing was set up for me.
He kind of knew what would push you.
I think so, right? Yeah. So that's
I love moments where you can't even be mad, right? Because it's just so well done.
right. Exactly. If I was writing that story, right,
Yeah.
or filming that movie,
Yeah.
my character deserved to get petrified.
Oh my gosh.
that is the exact right
Yeah.
thing to happen.
Oh, I love that. It kind of gives me chills, like how like really well timed GM reveals like that. They're so good.
Yeah, I agree.
Ooh, okay. Another question. This is like we're gonna flip to the other side a little bit. Can you tell us about a game that you've been in or run that kind of went horribly wrong, and like what that's going to bring to your best game ever? Like what piece of advice or what tool, what structure, you really learned from a bad experience?
So, the first thing that comes to mind, I don't know if this is the one that went most horribly wrong, but
Mm-hmm.
I had a TPK, right? I had a total party kill, and TPKs bring a campaign to an end, right?
Yeah.
Sort of by definition. And so in this particular case, again, this was a D&D game, and the characters had all been killed by, I think, a vampire. I think it was a vampire working for a lich. And um, so what I reasoned was, um, because they were high level, right? I don't remember, but they were probably like 12th level or something. And um, what I determined was that the bad guys, right, the vampire figures, okay, these are really powerful beings, these are really powerful people. It would be a waste to just let them be dead. So what I did was I had them all come back as vampires,
Oh,
right? The
cool.
vampire had turned all of them, and and because they were turned, they had to obey the commands of the vampire that had made them vampires, right? And so um, they were sort of commanded to go off and do something terrible, right? And this was a very, like, there was a paladin in the group, and they were, they were, pretty good, like, good in the D&D alignment sense characters. And so it created an interesting situation where they had to do something that they really didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't just a matter of how do we get back alive again, but it was how do we not do this thing that we're now being compelled to do? How do
Yeah.
we and so there was a lot of tension, and it turned out pretty well, right? And I uh I don't know that everyone was super satisfied with that
Hmm.
sort. I mean, because I think that sometimes sometimes people, kind of like with the petrification thing, right? Where you're just like, okay, I deserved that. There was at least one player in the group who was like, no, we all died. We should just be
Right.
dead. And that's legit. That's okay, right? But everybody else wanted the game to keep going, and this was a way to do that and to create a whole new kind of story and a whole new challenge. And of course, they did succeed in, coming returning back to normal life and killing the vampire or whatever. But
Yeah. Do you think that'll like inform, you know, like a part in your best game ever about kind of fundamental differences about what game we're playing? Or I could see
right,
that fitting
yeah,
into a lot of advice
I
and tools.
I think actually there will probably be a whole section on dying,
Mm.
right? Um, because it really varies from let me put it a different way. It really kind of it's like one of those questions when you sit down to say, okay, what kind of game are we going to play? And I
Yeah.
don't necessarily mean like genre or anything like that, right? This is the kind of thing where like the GM and the players get together and they say, what kind of game are we going to play? We're going to play the kind of game where if you're dead, you're dead and you make a new
Right.
character? Or are we going to play the kind of game where, resurrection is possible because there's magic in the world?
Mm-hmm.
Or we're going to play the kind of thing where no, you don't really die, you just are, horribly, horribly hurt, but then, but we don't want you to have to stop playing your character. Those are all valid choices. And I think that that's the kind of thing that we should talk about in the book, and it's the kind of thing that every group should sort of
Mm.
talk about, because that's you should have an expectation there, right? That shouldn't come as a surprise. Oh, I'm dead, and now I have to sit here for the rest of the game
Right.
session because I'm out of the game. Oh, I didn't realize this was that kind of a game. Or oh, I just have to roll up a new character really quick and then I can just jump in. Sure, great, right? I mean, but knowing that ahead of time, I think, is the important part. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a lesson that I would put into that. But also, just as a general a bit of advice about how to, think outside the box when it comes to salvaging a game that when things go wrong,
Mm.
right? And maybe even the bigger lesson there is pull a new story out of failure. Even
Mm.
ultimate failure like a TPK can spawn a new story, right? Or if it's just we're going up against the main villain and he beats us within an inch of our life and we barely get away alive. That's a springboard for a new story,
Yeah.
right?
Don't treat that as a failure of the
Right.
game, or,
Right.
find the
Right.
good usable elements of it. Oh, I like
Yeah.
that. Awesome. We are on question 12. So now we are on Kickstarter time. Oh, we've gotten a couple more backers. Thank you so much to everyone who's supported the Kickstarter and is here chatting with us in the AMA. I have so many questions, so I'm struggling to like pull some up there. Remember to include your backer number in case you're a backer. We want to make sure we sort of give you guys a little bit of priority as you're helping us out. This question is, we'll have to see how you want to approach it. But there are some questions from some Invisible Sun fans in the audience who are, wink, wink, nudge, nudging for a little more from you, Monty. So they have some questions about clocks and whether you might not have anything to say about clocks if they are slowly descending into madness by staring at all the clocks in that book. Is there anything you would tell someone who's really been pouring into those clocks?
I don't think I have any idea what you're talking about. Are there secret clocks in there? I mean, the weird thing about clocks is that sometimes they can determine an order of things. Because 4:30 comes before 5:30,
Right.
that kind of thing, right? And sometimes it's just the numbers that are important on the clock, right? And uh, you know,
A lot of ways to take clocks. It's true.
yeah, right. I mean, there's a reason that analog clocks are different from digital clocks, for example.
Yeah. All right. Monty on Clocks. You heard it here first.
And if
Our
you
new
don't play
podcast,
Invisible
Monty on
Sun, you
Clocks.
have no idea what the
I know.
why are they talking about clocks?
I hope that helped. Cool. So we are at the point where, as good online gamers, we've decided if I had grilled Monty here long enough, we could excuse him for a break. So we have a couple more questions we've definitely got in the can. So thank you so much for backers for getting us there. And so we are going to bring on our first guest. So
Cool.
it's going to take me a second to get there. So yeah, do you want to let me pop that over? Cool. They're going to be joining us via Zoom link. So our first guest is Janelle Jaques. Do you want to introduce Janelle a little bit? Tell our audience who Janelle is?
Yeah, Janelle, I've known Janelle for a long time. She is a fantastic artist. She has, she and I have worked together on, products back in TSR. But, you got to talk about, for me anyway, like one of the archetypes of old school adventures from way back when in Judges Guild was Dark Tower. Man, I still look at that thing for inspiration. It is fantastic, and so back then I was in awe of that, and still am.
Excellent. Hello, Janelle. So Monty, get out of here because I can't take too many faces on the screen, so you have to go.
Okay.
All right, we're giving Monty a break. Janelle, hello. It's so excited to meet you. Can you hear me okay? Let's see. Hello, can you see us? Hi.
Hi there.
Oh, I can hear you. Perfect. Welcome. Yeah. Welcome to the AMA-a-thon. This is Janelle. We've just been introducing you, and Monty was singing your praises and talking about how some of your work has just, continued to blow his mind in terms of design. Yeah.
I'm just adjusting the camera here.
Yeah, go for it. Awesome. Yes, so we've been grilling Monty for a while about your best game ever, which you are going to be a consulting expert on, and we are so grateful for it. As both someone who's just has accolades all across the industry and the kinds of work you've done. So thank you so much for coming on here.
No problem. Glad to do it.
All right, we have a question for you right out of the gate. So, yes, get ready. Our question for you, or our question I think, that we've been getting that we think is perfect for you to answer if you're up for it, is dungeon crawls and the exploration of ruins are really common across RPGs. So how do you, especially now that you've just come out with a great new cool dungeon crawl product called the Dragon Secret, how do you keep it fresh? How do you include new secrets and scary things that really keep things not from getting stale?
Well, I think there's a couple of ways to do that. I tend to approach it from kind of 2 points of view. One is take things that people aren't used to seeing together and put them together. You don't expect, I can at least share the secret behind the dragon. The secret behind Dragon's Secret is that she was never a dragon.
Ooh.
She was transformed into a dragon and ran a con game.
That's awesome.
So that's kind of the basic secret behind it. That's not something you look for. You look for a gold dragon to be this noble, kind, helpful creature. But no, this was a greedy con artist who just happened to be a wizard and be able to use magic. So that's one way I do it.
Yeah.
The other, and you never meet her because she's dead before you get there.
Awesome.
The other thing is that it's characters. Having characters that are really interesting to interact with, and even having some of your monsters, pick a few monsters, leader types, or people you might bring into the party as allies, have them be more robust as characters.
Ooh,
so
that's
you're
awesome.
Starting to build story around them.
Do you have like a favorite sort of dungeon NPC you've ever used, or someone? I'm sure there's been a lot.
I've done that a lot. Let's say the most recent ones I think I got into designing was, I found myself writing them I did another book recently called Quack Keep, which features duck characters.
The art is so good.
Because the duck book, because Dragon Secret was a part of that Kickstarter, I brought some of those ducks over into the book. And awesome. I made them into an NPC group. And then I found that telling their stories as adventure hooks was one of the most interesting things at the end of the product.
Ooh. Oh man, is this like the rival adventuring party? Is this party of ducks?
This could be a rival adventuring party. Awesome. Or it could be one you join, or it could be one that you help out. There's several different scenarios that could play out.
Oh man. I've put links in chat. Also, you got a lot of love from chat, so thanks for love, and Janelle. And thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to pop you another question. We've gotten so many ones, so thank you so much for helping take the heat off of Monty. Here is one. So again, you've talked about some cool ways to, bring different concepts together to keep things fresh. How do you, for your process, do you keep notes on cool ideas to use later? How do you, or do you just sort of when you sit down to write, are you mixing and matching right then? Do you do anything to sort of save those really good nuggets of ideas later?
Oh yeah, if something comes up with it and I'm out, say I'm out and about, I grab my phone and I just type myself a note in there and eventually send it to myself using Facebook.
Oh my gosh, awesome.
And then I'll do that. But one of the ways I really inspire myself is my process usually involves making maps first. Not even without having really ideas about it. So I start drawing those maps and they start kind of coming to life. And they start generating more ideas, and they start generating changes in the maps or additions or reductions. But being an artist, that's kind of where I start.
Oh man. Do you, are you literally starting with here is a hallway, I don't even know what kind of place this is? Or are you I'm kind of in I'm in a sewer or a weird mansion?
It's more of an idea of, cool. Well, if I'm designing a specific place,
right.
I start with a real place.
Yeah.
I'll actually start with a real place. and then I will create off of that and
Cool.
make it my own. But then I start developing ideas. Well, this could connect over here, and between these floors there could be a secret crawl space. Things like
Ooh.
that.
Are you doing that digitally or by hand?
I do everything digitally now.
Oh, do you?
I,
Cool. I bet
I
it's
kind
nice
of
for rearranging
change.
your maps.
Yeah. Well, I can kind of
Yeah.
let me spin my camera around just a little bit here. I'm going to take off what I've got on the screen.
Awesome.
But, let me see if I can spin the camera just a little bit. I work on a Cintiq.
Oh,
which
nice.
is basically a drawing tablet, and I do everything, whether it's maps, painting. I don't have anything going on. I had something going on there, but it's for a client.
Spoilers.
I can't talk about what I'm working on.
Oh, man. So that's like your main workstation. Yeah.
So I am literally drawing on things. I have been able to simulate nearly everything I used to do with ink and paint with digital tools.
Oh,
and the great thing is, if I make a mistake, I just hit undo.
Yeah. I bet that's a game changer, especially like, I was looking at the Dragon Secret, and it's a lot, right? It's a lot of, it's not a little thin folio. So like, I imagine just the sheer like volume of things that you're sketching, that you're planning out. I'm sure it's helpful to be digital at this point.
Yep, and I grab notes out of here. Like the Dragon Secret is actually the entry level for other projects I want to do. I want to link out from it. So,
ooh, awesome. All right, here is a question. This is an interesting one. What's the least favorite GM advice you've ever received?
Oh my.
Yeah. Something that just didn't work for you, or you thought was generally not great advice?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. A lot of it just says, it's the one where the worst advice is to think of yourself as the enemy of the players.
Right.
You're in a real sense, you're another member of the party.
Yeah.
You're just the one who's making it interesting for them.
Yeah, and your villains can be enemies of the characters, but like, we're here for fun, right? Don't be an enemy of the players.
Exactly. The whole point. I mean, you can kill players. I'm not going to say you shouldn't kill players. I'm sorry.
Go to town. Don't kill players. Correct.
Characters can die. That's a part of stories. But you should be there to give them a great story experience so that when their character dies, however it is, they come away from that adventure setting with a story to tell.
Oh man, that resonates so well with something Monty was just saying about a character death he had. That was, he was happy. He was almost happy he missed his, his saving throw, right? Because it was so good.
It's like I'm not going to tell the whole story behind it, but one of the most momentous places in my game is where one of the other characters in our party said, "I jump in the boots." We all died after that. It became a long series of fighting against the monster that possessed him, and the entire party died.
Oh my gosh.
But it began with, "I jump in the boots."
And downhill from there.
Downhill from there.
Oh, I'm so excited. Hello.
That's my wife, Rebecca.
Hello, Rebecca. Oh, we've got a stowaway. Awesome. Let's see. Chat, if you have questions for Janelle, I forgot to say that you should, you can pop them to me and I can bring them over. Let's see. People are really enjoying your advice about also not killing players.
Well, that's just players speaking.
Yes, exactly. All right, one more question for you, because I think Monty will be back shortly. Thank you so much. Yeah, when you're thinking about, I'm trying to parse this one a little bit. So, like, when you're thinking about not just the location, but kind of scenes you might want in a session as a game master, like, I know they're going to meet this person, or they're going to, get the quest giver. What do you, what are the things you go through to make sure, like, what's your checklist of, like, making that a good scene? Like, what do you think about to make sure it really works for the players? How do you approach that?
One of the things I never really do is I never really set up encounters that I know are going to happen that night.
Yeah.
I prepare everything in hopes that I've covered the one direction you go.
Right.
So, but when I'm building the scene, I want the players to feel they have a sense of space, a sense of place. They know where they are.
Yeah.
I want to have them have a sense of mood, building apprehension by the time they get to this point, or if necessary, they're completely caught off guard. You know, they've been doing something. It's however I want to stage the scene out. That got that person stepping forward. And then the final thing is make sure I know who that character is, and not necessarily how they're going to talk or how they're going to look, but who they are, what motivates them, what they want out of any kind of engagement with the party. I mean, it could just be blood, but it could be they want something from the party just as much as the party wants something from them.
Right. And that lets you create those interesting moments that actually react to what's happening rather than setting it in stone. Thinking about mood is really smart. I need to be better about that's one thing I'm working on, like how to create good mood. My stuff skews zany, so I'm trying to see if I can.
Zany is good. Zany
it can be.
Good.
Awesome. All right. Monty, I'm not sure if you're there. You're allowed to pop back on if you are. I feel like I'm talking to the ghost. Ah!
I'm back.
Hey.
Hey, Janelle.
Literally, long night time no see.
Yeah, for sure. So, I know that Darcy has just fed you a bunch of questions, but I'm not going to let you go without answering a question of mine. I had a really good one earlier, and I wanted to know what your take on it is. The question was, what's when you're the DM, what's something that a player can do that is awesome, right? That makes the experience better for you. What, we talk a lot about what the GM can do to make the experience better for the player, but what's the other way?
The other way that works for me, and it's kind of something I actually include in my adventure writing, is have the player find something in the adventure, build their own story around it on the fly, which allows me to completely change what I was doing or to imbue that as something important to the storyline. Basically, take something they find and work it into my story on the fly. That is my favorite form of player GM interaction.
Yeah, because it creates a situation where now, as the GM, you're reacting, right? Which is part of the fun of the game, right? Is reacting to other people's creativity. So yeah,
you kind of get to be a player.
Yeah, that's really cool. Janelle, thank you so much for being a part of this project. I'm so excited, and I'm, we go way back, all the way back to TSR, and I was saying before you jumped on, all the way back to like Dark Tower. Huge fan.
Yeah, I think I was there for not very long, and then you showed up as one of the new kids.
I was a new fish, yes. Yeah, that would have been about 94, right?
Yep. And I joined in. I was on staff in-house in late 93.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so just after you came in. Yeah, yep. Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I was able to take a restroom break, so even better. All right. Thanks so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And I'm back. Hello.
Hey, Darcy.
Getting a break?
Great.
Yeah.
She had a lot of great things to say.
Yeah, Janelle is fabulous. I'm so excited that she's on the project.
Me too.
All right, so we have queued up 10 more questions for you. Folks who are in chat, this is really fun for us. We've got a couple more guests we'd like to bring on, but we're going to grill Monty here a minute more. If you would like to hear more than 10 questions answered, we would love it if you would share the Kickstarter. Go bring a new backer in. I think we're going to sort of showcase in this AMA the diversity of cool people with cool experiences and perspectives that, even though the whole team at MCG is going to be working on it, this team of consulting experts are just going to make sure it sings and, speaks to all kinds of gamers, which I'm really excited for.
Me too.
Alrighty, so go share that Kickstarter. Thank you. Um,
All right,
here
I'm
is
rested and refreshed. I'm ready to go. Give me a hard one.
okay. Ooh, a hard one.
I
Let's give you an evil one. Um,
Okay.
what are your tips for running an evil party? That is something I've never done. I'd be really nervous to run my first evil party. So, what would you tell someone who's maybe their players really want that, like, or maybe the GM wants it and the players are nervous? Like, what do you think makes a good evil campaign?
All right, I have two answers. And the first is my actual honest advice is don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
There's already enough evil in the world. We don't need to pretend to also be evil
Yeah.
in our imaginary worlds. But I know that, people are going to ignore that advice. And I have run evil campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I sort of feel like it was something that was very popular among my group when we were 15, 16 years old. Everyone wanted to be chaotic evil, right? And the anti-paladin had just shown up in Dragon magazine, and uh, everyone wanted to try that out. And it can work, right? And oh, hi, Kat.
Cat
um,
intrusion.
and for third edition, I wrote the Book of Wild Darkness, and there's a whole section on
Mm-hmm.
running evil campaigns in there for D&D. But mostly, um, so here's the interesting thing about evil PCs, and this is it's only for the right group, only for the right players, but it kind of exploring what it actually means to be evil, what
Mm.
evil really is actually kind of an interesting exercise, and evil PCs will do that, right? like
Yeah.
like does it just mean haha, I go around and I kill all the babies that I find,
Right.
which is kind of cartoon evil. And I guess if that's what you want, that's fine. But actually sort of exploring, somebody who is just really, really self-interested, right, to the point of to the detriment of others around them, right, or someone who's actually psychotic or mentally disturbed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these again, if you've got the right group, right,
Yeah.
because unless you're going for the cartoon evil, right, you actually want sort of a level of maturity to sort of explore these themes. But my advice, if you're going to do this for whatever reason, is to be aware that the biggest problem, the biggest drawback is the obvious one, and that is, why on earth are these evil people all working in concert, right?
Yeah.
If they're all super selfish or self-interested or whatever, aren't they just all going to betray each other? And maybe they will, and maybe that's part of the fun. Maybe that's the end game of the evil campaign, is that
Yeah.
everyone turns on each other, and that's fine. But you know, giving them reasons to not do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
To show them that, okay, you might be a bunch of jerks, but you're a bunch of jerks who really need each other, right? and
Yeah.
and maybe that's giving them a threat that is so big that the only way they can possibly overcome it is to work together. Or I mean, uh it used to be a huge cliche in like TV shows back when, like in the 80s, right? That you'd have your good guy and your bad guy like trapped in the same place, and the only way they could escape was to work together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that can be entertaining, that can be interesting, to put a bunch of people together who shouldn't work together but they have to.
Yeah.
And that doesn't even have to be evil, like with a capital chaotic capital evil. That can just be a bunch of people who normally just don't play well with others. um, but I guess the only other thing that I'll say about evil characters is um, it's kind of the same lesson that's sort of true of all characters, and that is um, every character should have a goal. Every character should have a thing that they want. And that comes right out of fiction writing, right? Every character needs to have something that propels them forward. And that needs to be more than I'm evil and so I destroy and kill everything I find, right? Because that gets boring really fast.
Yeah.
But a character, who has a goal, right? And maybe it's not even necessarily a super evil goal, right? Maybe it's the same kind of goal you'd give another character, right? I want to free my friend who is trapped in, some whatever extra dimensional prison or whatever it is, right? And but I am willing to go to any lengths to do that, right? Which is a different way to approach evil, right? Which is just not necessarily like in the I'm writing my alignment on my character sheet thing, but just like, I've got no qualms about anything. I'm so focused on this goal. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there, even if it means hurting other people or whatever. That is probably a very decent way to have an evil campaign, particularly if everyone's goals kind of coincide.
Awesome. That was some good advice. Yeah, I still think I wouldn't try it, but I think it makes sense to get really the perfect starting conditions to make sure it goes off well and that they have a reason for not immediately backstabbing each other, at least. All right, so we have another guest lined up actually. So if you're comfortable with it, I'm gonna go summon them while we're maybe having you answer one more question in the meantime.
Okay.
So, this is an interesting one. How have your GMing experience influenced your the development of games you would later design? So what's the relationship between stuff you GM and then your design sensibilities?
It's actually a very straight line. And that is very often, I think what people assume is that like a game designer comes up with a bunch of ideas and then play tests them. But for me, it doesn't work that way. For me, I'm playing the game and I see needs, I see, things that would be cool to have happen in that game. And the design arises out of that, almost just like a straight through line, right? So like back when I was doing a lot of third edition D&D stuff, I would do things like, I'd run my regular game and then, I would see a need for, we really could use a subsystem that does this, or we really could use a whole new spell that does that. And I would insert those into the game, and then that would be the stuff that would then fill the products that I would write. So for me, that's very much a through line from GMing to designing.
Awesome. I am now a disembodied voice. My ultimate form has finally been achieved. Thank you so much, Monty, for that answer. And we have Ajit George here, our guest, to come relieve Monty of my ceaseless questions as disembodied interviewer. How are you doing, Ajit? Welcome.
Hey, Darcy. It's great to see you. I am doing great.
Hi, Ajit.
Hi, Monty. How are you doing?
I've been talking now for an hour and a half.
Yeah, you're like an Iron Man. I've been watching you. I'm like, how do you do it? You're just you're like the Energizer Bunny of gaming.
Well, I really appreciate you jumping in and spelling me for a minute. But I'm going to come back and I'm going to have a question for you. So don't go away before I come back.
Awesome. Go recharge your batteries.
I'm back. Okay. Hi, Ajit. Hello.
Hey, Darcy.
Why don't you let's tell the people, like, I know you work on so many projects. So when I try to summarize what Ajit George is known for, I certainly love your work with Gaming as Other, which you've done some great projects with. I know you've helped like consult on making games. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but sort of helping games be more inclusive or be better at representing experiences that the creators may not quite have. So it looks like the video froze a little bit. Ajit, can you still hear me? Oh no, Ajit.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Sorry about that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but do you also want to mention to people your work with Shanti Bhavan?
Yeah, sure. you got a lot of what I do in gaming. I've written for a bunch of games, but mostly taking a perspective that is from my Indian heritage and my Indian background, or is my immigrant background, one of those two. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's been, a lot of the games that I've written for are based off of that background.
Mm-hmm.
And I've consulted also with game studios and designers on diversity. So kind
Mm-hmm.
of trying to, help them as they sort through some complexities in writing non-normative storylines, and also worked with cons on that same bit as well.
Nice.
And this year helped produce a couple of shows for Gen Con, which was
Yes.
really exciting. One was Insights, which is sort of like a TED Talk for games, and the other
Mm-hmm.
one is Conversations, which is this great conversation between the guest.
Oh no, getting a little bit of a connection issue here. Sorry, folks. Uh, let's see. So while that connection is coming back on, Shauna Germain was actually one of the Insight presenters and did a fantastic talk that's should be up on YouTube. And as soon as we sort of pull out the section of, they sort of recorded like days and days worth of footage. So as soon as we pull out some of the individual talks, we will be sharing those around. I'm hoping Ajit comes back. I hope it's not on my end. Sadness. Um, you can all hear me, right? Just tell me in chat if you can still see and hear me as a non-disembodied voice. Um, oh, we lost Ajit. Oh, sad. Okay, Monty's back.
I'm back.
Maybe we'll pester. Yeah, maybe we'll pester. I can text Ajit my question, and then Ajit can get back to us on that. All right. So sadness, but Ajit's great, and Ajit's going to be, a fantastic voice to have on your best game ever. And we're so excited that he's a consulting expert. Oh hey.
Hey, he's back.
Ah. Hello.
Hey, I tried to move. Sorry, I decided to move to a different part of the house and see maybe this is a little bit better.
Cool. Seems to be working for me. Thank you.
Okay, great.
This is also one of the joys of online gaming. Get used to this. As far as I can tell, that's like half of online gaming is I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I work with the nonprofit I work with is based in India, and so this is a lot of my business meetings too.
Oh boy.
I can't hear you. Can you hear me? I'm struggling back and forth.
Awesome. We had a question for the AMA that we thought would be really cool for you if you're up for it. And it was a question on people who are playing in games that have some historical element, and people are asking, do you have any advice, or do you enjoy games where like there is a historical element, and like how beholden do you how do you decide how beholden you should be to the actual facts versus sort of the creative improv process of gaming?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that touches into like a topic that's often debated and discussed in the
Yeah.
gaming hobby, which is historical accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
And I've definitely wrestled with this question. When I think of historical accuracy, I think of trying our best to be true to the people, the time, and the place that we're investigating, or we're gaming in, or we're looking at. With a challenge with that is, I was reading this great article with an interview with James Lowen, and James Lowen wrote "Lies My Teacher Told Me." And it's a history book, or an attempt to examine American history and maybe tell some stories that were not told, or correct some inaccuracies. And it's sort of in the same vein as Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States. And both of those books challenge the narrative that is commonly told about American history, which is to say, we continue to get better no matter what, and we make mythological figures out of out of the people that have lived in the past, that have accomplished big things, whether those big things are good or bad. And so the point of that really is that the history of that we understand is often an incomplete history, sometimes an inaccurate history, and sometimes an outright falsified history. And, a quote I think misattributed to Winston Churchill is, history is written by the victors.
Yeah.
And that is pretty true when we think about what we might think of a story. Is this story complete, or is this story only written by the dominant people, or the people that are controlling the systems of education or the systems of government at the time, right? And so when I think about historical accuracy in games, first of all, I love historical games. I think they're fantastic, and they have a great opportunity to engage with a part of society's lived experiences or people's lived experiences. But I also try to look for games or stories that break the normal narrative mold. And so, a couple of great examples are, and because this is really going on around right now, is Darker Hue Studios' Harlem Unbound. And that,
yes,
I think that Harlem Bound is fantastic. I think it won a bunch of Ennies, and Harlem Unbound is fantastic particularly because it looks at the Harlem Renaissance through the lens of the Cthulhu mythos. And Lovecraft was not kind to people of color, and so Chris Bivey really kind of turns that on its head and goes, let's be in this Cthulhu mythos. Let's engage with this great, good story vehicle. But let's think about it with people of color, African Americans being the protagonists, and like kind of embracing the rich history and the people of the 1920s. And I think that's important because a lot of, I think my automatic default when I think of like the 1920s, and this is, I think, the automatic default of a lot of people, is I think of like maybe like the kind of the Gilded Era and very white, or maybe like Private Eyes, and like they're always white men in trench coats, or I just sort of these stereotypes that go on. And what we miss is this rich part of Americana that was very vibrant and beautiful, and very much worth exploring the people of that time. Another example would be Bully Pulpit's Night Witches, right? And when we think of World War II, we think about the men of World War II often fighting on the front lines, and the great battles and these historical fierce contests often between men. And if women play a role, they're often secondary role or support role, and which they did amazingly. But there's some really great stories of women on the front lines, and the Night Witches, that's Jason Morningstar's and Bully Pulpit's attempt to examine the great story and the challenging and horrific and deeply brutal story of this all-women Soviet Union bomber pilot unit that terrorized the German military for about 1,000 nights consecutively. And they just basically dropped bombs until they had no more bombs, and then just started dropping like tire irons and whatever they could out of these very outdated planes. And not these outdated biplanes were given to them because the Soviet military were undermining the women who were fighting against the German. Like the sexism was in play there. And so I think there's incredibly beautiful stories to be told. And that's a lot of my writings about that too. Like, is to try to re-examine narratives that we think as normal and go, hey, let's look at some other areas as well. And my worry is when we say that we think of historical accuracy only by the dominant narrative, or by the victors, or by the people who controlled maybe an area or were in charge of that area, is that there's a rich history of people and cultures that is missed. And I think as gamers, man, I come to gaming to like dream and to play creatively and to have my imagination pushed. So if I limit myself to a really, really narrow subset of stories, that's kind of sad. And I would love to explore more, explore more. History is huge and beautiful and amazing. Let's like dig into that.
Yeah, but dig just at least that one layer, and you'll find some really beautiful stories. Those are all really great recommendations. Chat is aflutter with how excited they are about pretty much everything you just listed. So people have some good reading lists. I think Monte is ready for another question for you before we let you go. But oh my gosh, so excited to have you on the project. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm so glad to be a part of this project. It's just great stuff.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to relinquish my control here and let Monty on.
All right, bye, Darcy.
Hey, I'm back.
Hey, Monty.
Hey, by the way, I'm so glad you brought up Harlem Unbound. I just read that a couple of weeks ago, and it's fantastic. I really,
Yeah,
really
yeah.
So before you go, I have a question for you, and that is, so I know that like me, you started gaming, when you were a kid and whatnot. You've been a gamer a long time.
Yeah.
What's one of the wow moments that you have had at a game where somebody, whether it was the GM, another player, or somebody did something in a game session that just made things better, right? And it just kind of made you go, wow, that's really cool, right? What's with the idea that maybe there's something that we can learn from that wow moment.
Sure. Wow. There's definitely a bunch. I started gaming when I was in fourth grade at Redbox, and just digging into it and being completely stunned. Um, a wow moment. I'll give you two because they're very different. But I just want to kind of touch on both for different reasons. The first one was, and this maybe wasn't a GM. This was the writer of a game called a LARP called Play the Cards, and it's part of the Scandinavian Nordic LARP scene. And Play the Cards blew me away because there was a character in there. It's about high school cliques. You each players play by suits. So you're maybe there was one clique that are the spades, one clique is the hearts, one clique is the diamonds, and one clique is the clubs. And I forget which what clique is what. There's the jocks, and then there's the artsy people, and there's the the popular kids, and so on and so forth. But there's a wild card, and the wild card is an Indian immigrant kid, literally an Indian immigrant kid. And I read that, and I almost started crying because it reminded me so much of me. But I had never, in all my life, and since I was in fourth grade, ever seen a character that could have been written for me specifically, and that was really powerful. It was an incredible writing experience. I had so much fun with the character. I really channeled a lot of myself into it, obviously. But it was a really beautiful moment of thinking, wow, this game designer, doesn't know who I am, has no idea at all, but really captured kind of this tension because the card is a wild card. So I am an outsider. I'm not part of any of these cliques, but I'm still, I'm still represented, and it really was true to me, and I think that was kind of amazing.
That is amazing.
Yeah. On a different note, one of my favorite was Brendan Taylor was running a hack of Apocalypse World, and he at this table were some great players, John Harper, Blaze in the Dark, and Judd Carlman, and so on and so forth. There was a great group of players together at this table, and he was running this hack of Apocalypse World that was based off of Legends of the Five Rings. It was kind of inspired by it, at least. And what he did was really interesting. I sometimes find that it's being a great GM, which you have plenty of experience. You're writing the book on it, or you're writing the book on having great games. Is about understanding that tension with players and understanding when to give players a lot of story and kind of give them some direction and give them some foundation, and when to let them just riff. And what Brennan did was he built this beautiful world and this beautiful situation, and he gave us just enough prompts, and then he realized that we were just riffing off of each other. It was like jazz. We were improvising each other. And I think in this 4-hour session, Brennan spoke maybe a dozen times just to add that moment of hey, this is where you're gonna go, or this little bit of extra information. And he just let us improv, and it was just this magical, incredible moment of these players having this energy. And it was deeply tragic, and half the players died like suicides, we were committing seppuku and honor duels, and so these great romance. It was first, it started with this comedy, and it turned into this drama, and then it turned into a tragedy, and brother and sister like abandoned each other, and it was beautiful. But I really admired Brennan for not getting in his own way or in our way, and rather really supporting us in us finding our story and us finding our characters. I thought it was actually a brilliant piece of GMing, because if you looked in the onset, somebody would be like, "Oh, Brennan wasn't doing a whole lot of GMing." No, he was the maestro. He knew exactly how much to give and how much to step aside, and he let us do our thing. And that game is like years old. Many of the players at that table will tell you that was just this incredible multiple people wrote up like stories about this game, and it kind of lives on in legend. And it was just, yeah, it was just a great moment for me. So
that's great. And it's I think it's great from the GM's point of view too, right? Because it's so rewarding to just sit back and not talk and not be the one who is sort of guiding things, but the players have sort of taken on that role and are filling the empty narrative space with their own creativity. It allows, at maybe in fact, and we were just talking about this with Janelle, right? It allows the GM to suddenly be the one reacting to the players, which is a really fun turnabout.
Yeah, I think a lesser GM would have made the mistake and been like, I'm sure Brennan had, we kind of like took the thing and ran with it, because he just had this incredible, beautiful, like smart scenario up. But I'm sure he had a different storyline maybe in mind. But and a lesser GM would have been like, well, I have this storyline, and I'm going to force this storyline on you. And,
Right.
and you're a game designer, but you're also a writer. And I know many writers will say, you can try to plot this thing out, or you can just let the characters live and kind of like let the characters do their thing. And as a gifted writer, it's better to just like, hey, maybe I have some ideas of where this is going to go, but my characters start speaking and they start doing their own thing. As a gifted GM, it's the same thing. He was like, hey, I had this storyline, but you guys are doing your thing, and I'm going to help you do your thing. I'm going to help make this magic. I'm going to help make this music. And that was great. It was beautiful.
The joke at my Invisible Sun game that I'm running right now is, I could show up in the first few minutes of the game, say, 3 sentences of, oh, there's a guy and he's cursed and he doesn't know how to relieve the curse, and then I could just go watch a movie, because because the players will just take that and they will run with it and they will build on it, and of course I wouldn't go watch the movie because it's so much fun to watch them go. Yeah. Right. So that is definitely, I think, a sweet spot for GMs.
Yeah, I think that's a gift that you both created a great game, Invisible Sun, like having that setting to make that possible. You gave your players all the tools, and then you trusted your players to be able to do it, and they're great players. So you've got all the magic there, and
right.
Yeah. So
yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you for being a part of this project. It means a lot to me to know that when, as we're working on this, you're going to give a lot of feedback. You're going to give your own advice. I think you're going to make this book a much better book. And so thank you so much.
I am thrilled and honored to be part of the project. And thank you for inviting me into your space, Monty. I'm happy to be part of it.
Cool.
Take care and good luck. Like, don't hydrate, take bathroom breaks, and good luck.
All right, thanks again.
Ajit, you're so great. I tried to be quiet, but I kept making mm-hms. Awesome.
All right, guys, take care. Bye.
So good. So many good stories in there. Goodness.
Yeah.
All right, but we're putting you back on the heat. All right. That was
all
that.
Right. Let's do it.
When you write adventures, do you have like an outline or a checklist? Like, there's a lot that goes into an adventure. How do you keep yourself organized and making a really good one over and over again, right? What's your approach?
Right. Right. So, writing adventures for publication is interesting because you don't want to fall into the trap of just designing an adventure the way you would design an adventure for your group at home, right? Because the thing is that if you're the GM, you know all your players, you know the characters that they have, and so you just sort of kind of fill in the gaps,
Yeah.
right? And you tailor it to what you know they're going to like. But if you're writing this for publication, you're writing this for everybody's group, right? And what's more, you don't know who the players are, you don't know who the characters are. It's this really weird, you know, from a writing point of view, it's this really weird exercise of like writing a story but not putting any characters in it, right? Which is bizarre and weird. And so recognizing that and making sure that your adventure, even if you're making like a one-shot thing that's just going to be, you know, one evening's worth of adventure, making sure that it's got something for, I don't want to say everybody because that's probably too much, right? But has something for a lot of different kinds of gamer needs, right? It's got, you know, the three pillars of gaming, right, are combat and interaction and exploration.
Yeah.
And make sure that, you know, you're covering all those bases, right? Because somebody's going to want, you know, we talked about Bruce and always wanting to know what's behind the door, right? Bruce is an explorer. And so, you know, making something to discover, right? Making something to find. And it doesn't have to literally be go behind a door, right? It could be a cool, you know, secret that's in a book or you know, anything like that, right?
Yeah.
You have there be people to talk to, unless you're writing some adventure where that's not possible. But then figure out the kinds of things that those players like and give them something like that, right? Even if it's not, even if they're, you know, you're in an abandoned ruin and there isn't anyone to talk to, have there be like some ancient journal that you find and you can read, and it's a different way to interact with a person in the setting, right? You know, those are that's my adventure checklist right there, is ticking off those boxes, making sure that there is something for everyone, making sure that there are multiple decision points, right? So that your adventure isn't just a through line, but it's got a number of ways that it can go. You know, you can't, as an adventure writer, you can't cover every single base. You can't anticipate everything that the players are, you know, some group is going to take a left turn at Albuquerque and go off in a really weird way. And you can't predict that, but you can predict the 2 or 3 most likely incomes and sort of inform the GM. And you know, well, I could talk about adventure writing for a long time, right? Because that's informing the GM. That is what you're doing, right? You're not, as an adventure writer, you're not creating a story. You are creating all of the pieces, as my partner Shauna would say, all the pieces parts, so that someone else can then take them and create a story. Yeah, that's very, very quickly advice
your checklist. Yeah, that's awesome. I assume there will be probably more on thinking about adventures in your best game ever, so I bet there's quite a bit
from both points of view,
right?
Absolutely, right? Because like I said, right, creating an adventure for your group, which is really, I mean, even that's a false thing to say, right? GMs don't create adventures for their group. They prepare for a session.
Right.
The group then gets together and creates a story which will have adventures in it. But so it's really weird. Professional adventure writing is a weird thing because, you know, most campaigns aren't really made of adventures. They're made of things that the players do, which then can sort of after the fact be like, oh, that was quite an adventure.
Yeah. Oh, I like that a lot. Okay, I have summoned Tanya to pass, which I'm really excited for. Oh my gosh, and she came so fast. Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Tanya.
How are you?
I am tired because I've been talking for almost 2 hours now. So I'm going to bow out for a second and I'm going to give you center stage, but I'm going to come back and I've got a question for you.
No worries. Sorry about the mess in here. So Darcy, if you want to crop me.
I think you're cropped. Yep, you're looking good. All green screen. Excellent. Tanya, welcome. Oh my gosh, you're so great. Let's see. So plugs should be, you work with I Need Diverse Games. Do a bunch of cool video game Twitch streaming, which your awesome setup would indicate to our viewers. Yeah. What else do you want the awesome audience to know about your amazing work?
Oh God, what don't I do?
I know you're terrifying. Your schedule's terrifying.
My schedule is. I'm only terrified when I don't get enough sleep. Let's see. I'm on the Rivals of Waterdeep show on the Twitch D&D channel.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I'm part of We're All Monsters Here, or Here We're All Monsters. That was just announced by James Gates right before Gen Con.
Awesome.
Doing some writing I can't quite talk about yet.
Yeah.
And streaming, writing. I'm contributing a chapter to a book on narrative design.
Oh boy. Awesome.
Spoiler. Let's see what else. And I occasionally live at home. So
I don't know if I believe that.
I'm home right now.
An elaborate ruse. Awesome. Well, like all of those diverse experiences are going to bring amazing insights to your best game ever. So thank you so much for being a part of this and for coming on our Ask Me Anything and giving Monty a break.
No worries.
Yeah. So I posted some links to some of your stuff in chat, and I'll keep doing that as you answer this question for me. So,
okay.
Could you tell us a time in a game where things went really wrong, but like a player or a GM kind of was able to recover it?
So did I recover?
Like did the player or a GM kind of save the game from like going totally off the rails or getting, really disastrous?
Well, it could be one of two things. An old campaign I was just revisiting where I was playing a elven rogue, and even with high stats, because I was a rogue, I rolled badly against a dragon I was trying to run from, and my character became dragon food.
Oh my gosh!
And I was like, well, that went badly because I was trying to get away from the dragon, and then go help my party. So I became a snack.
Yeah.
That did not work out well, but it wasn't a total party kill. It was just a bad roll. And the other one I was thinking of is actually Stream of Many Eyes. When Rivals got announced and premiered, is I've crit failed, and my character lost her faith in tier.
Oh,
and then
man.
someone reminded me I had advantage. I think it was Poisel from the audience. And I, dice were like, oh, that was bad. So here's a crit success. And I was able to totally destroy the creature we were fighting. And it was it made for just great play, but also great viewing.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Do you like to play games that kind of have some of those elements that let you, as a player, kind of influence the role, like either re-rolls or stuff? Or do you like to be what do you prefer?
I like role playing more than combat.
Right.
But combat is going to happen at some point, depending on how you're playing. And it was a good way to kind of always kind of jump in the deep end, as it were, for Stream of Many Eyes. And I like combat, but the dice are not always great to you.
Yeah, I know.
So it was fun. I like a 70-30 balance of roleplay and combat.
Nice.
Yes, that was me who moderated Queers a Three-Sided Die. I'm sorry, I have chat up as well.
Awesome. Good. I was just about to say, chat loves you.
Aw, hi, chat.
All right, so I think Monty has another question for you, so I should yield the floor. But oh my gosh, Tanya, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you so much for being on this project. It's going to rock.
You're so welcome. Thank you for thinking of me.
Oh man, chat would kill us if we didn't. I'm sure they would bring you up.
Oh my God, no.
All right, I think Monty's there, so I'll go disembodied once he pops on. Yep. Bye.
I'm here.
Hello.
Hey. So, like Darcy said, thank you so much for being a part of this. And I'm really excited about seeing what tips you have to add to the book and the feedback that you have. And I think it's going to be great.
I'm so excited.
Here's the question I have for you, though. So I know that you've done a fair bit of streaming of games. Something that I've only started kind of this year doing. If you had to give somebody one piece of advice for streaming a game, what would that advice be?
Remember that you are, well, in terms of tabletop, remember that you are entertaining, not just rolling dice. Because it's very different being on stream, especially when you're physically together versus like everyone's kind of dialing like we're doing for this AMA. So when you're physically together, that energy is there. Remember that a lot of people, when they're watching a Twitch stream or a mixer or whoever, they're there not just for the dice rolls, but for the people. They want to get to know your characters. They want to get to know who you are. Because your personality is going to come through in this character. No matter what you do, it happens. Accept that. But remember that you're there partially to entertain. But don't be afraid to try new things, because a lot of people figure, well, if someone's watching me, I have to act a certain way, I have to be a certain way. Just be yourself. Get fully into the character and embrace that role playing aspect of it. Because 9 times out of 10, people aren't going to see the dice rolls. You know, even if you're using like Roll20, if you're physically there and people can see you roll dice, they're not so much worried about that. They want to get to see you and how your characters interact. Because the worst thing is when people are not clicking well, and when you can tell that they're not enjoying the game.
Right.
And that makes a huge difference. Versus people that generally look happy to be together when they click and they're enjoying it. And I think it's a different energy when you're all kind of calling in versus when you're sitting together.
That is really good advice. Yeah, I think so. I think it's all about the energy. That makes a lot of sense to me. Cool. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
No problem. I'm looking at the chat, wondering if there's any question before I run away. Oh, Rourke said the Q&A is fast-paced. It's okay, Rourke. We'll answer questions.
Yeah.
Darcy, I hear you.
I'm a disembodied voice.
She's ascended.
Yes.
You have ascended. I have a question for you all, actually.
Ooh.
Okay.
What was the impetus for a book about running games versus just another game system? Because so many people want to get into tabletop, they want to get into GMing, and yet that's one thing that terrifies them of the literal how-to, and then not just how-to, but will I be good at it?
Right. You know, it's sort of long been this book has sort of long been a dream of mine. I feel like lots of hobbies that are out there have like a go-to book that just kind of gives somebody the basics as well as sort of dives into the deep end a little bit, right? And doesn't like, I wanted to create a book that didn't talk about the game. Right? We've got a million games, but I wanted something that talked about all the stuff that kind of goes in between that, right? That captures and talks about all those things, whether it be like hosting a game, right? What to expect when you've got 5 people coming over to your house and you're gonna all play a game, right? Or what it takes to run a game, what it takes to be a good player, right? That has nothing to do with, well, it's very little to do with rolling dice. It has everything to do with interacting with each other as humans, right? And so that's what I think what the core of this book is really going to be about. The interactions that go on and how to make all that work.
Yeah, it's cool because a lot of times I run into people and that's their stumbling block is either I can't find people to play with,
right?
Not either realizing that you can play online or maybe not having the ability to play online because you need decent internet, or just being worried about going into a game store or how do I start. So I'm super, super excited.
Yeah. I think a lot of that can be intimidating, and there's a lot of new people coming in to the hobby right now, and I hope that this will be a good book for them.
Yeah. It looks like there was a question in the chat. I hope I have not lost it. Oh, from work. They asked how I make my stream such a pleasant place. Because I hold to the "we don't do that here" method. I don't let people come in and take over. If they troll, if they harass, they're just gone. I know that Adam Coble has a very different methodology, but he acknowledges his privilege and patience to educate. Some days I just don't have that patience. So the people in the chat and the people in the community are the priority, and if I get mad about it, I'll deal with it later off stream, but I want people to have a safe place to hang out.
That is so important, and surprisingly difficult to do online, is to just find a safe place where you can all just chill.
Yeah, very much so.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Tanya, and really appreciate it, and really appreciate you being a part of this project.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
I'm swooping in. Oh my gosh, yes. Thank you so much, Tanya.
You're so welcome.
This is great.
All
right. Take it easy. We will be talking a lot more as this project continues. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Have a good evening.
You too.
Yay. Oh, Tanya's so great. I love the, we don't do that here kind of call in methodology of like, oh, you said a thing that is kind of hurtful. Like, it's not, permaban, but that doesn't happen here. So if you do it again, we're going to stomp it down. But it takes a lot of work. So I do respect Tanya, all the work she probably has to put in to keep things, civil, especially in the video gaming space, which just has lots more people, right?
Yeah, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah. Yes. All right, Monty, back to you.
All right.
Let's see where we're at. Okay, this is a question I have for you, so deal with it. Because now I'm getting, power mad. What kind of superpower would you want? Yeah, so if you could have any superpower, I want to know, what would it be?
That would be teleportation. I had that answer for you at the ready.
Jeez.
That is not the first time I've been asked that, because I'm a geek, right?
Oh, I didn't know. Yeah.
No, teleportation, because, travel times suck.
They do.
Right? And just the ability, I've got friends, well, I was going to say all over the country, but actually all over the world. And I don't see many of them hardly at all. And how great would it be? I mean, we wouldn't need online gaming, right? If we could all just, or, even if just one of us could teleport, right? And that would be awesome. It would be awesome.
I definitely...
Get those transporters figured out, scientists.
At least the GMs should get them. I mean, I would definitely posit that every GM should have a teleporter. maybe your best, in a few years, your best game ever will include a pre-packaged teleporter. Awesome. Okay, another question. And then I think we have one final guest that I'm very excited to bring on. So I'll pause this question and then we'll maybe start summoning a final guest. Someone I believe on Reddit is running a game tomorrow, and they were asking what trap or monster they should throw at the party. Compliments of Monte Cook.
All right. Well, so the questioner didn't specify what game they're playing, but correct. I'm guessing the keywords trap and monster certainly suggest D&D or maybe Pathfinder. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to base my answer on that. So I'm going to pull out an old favorite of mine that I put in an old 2nd edition D&D module. So this is a trap. Actually, it's both. It's a trap and a monster. Because here's the thing, right? It's a pit trap. And so, you step on the door and you fall down, right? But halfway down the pit trap, because of course the pit is, because you're using graph paper, it's 10 by 10. They always are. And so stuck in the middle of the pit, halfway down, is a gelatinous cube.
Oh, Lord.
So you fall into the gelatinous cube, and so one of two things can happen in this trap. You can fall into the gelatinous cube and then fall all the way through it, but you pass through a gelatinous cube and they paralyze you and whatnot. So you might end up paralyzed at the bottom of the pit, right? Uh, and then how are you going to get out,
Yeah.
right? Or right, you can make it so that there's like some chance that you'll actually just kind of get stuck there, right? And so then you're trapped inside the gelatinous cube in the pit. But the really, really fun part about this trap is, your friends have to figure out a way to help you. And so they're going to think that the thing to do is to kill the gelatinous cube. But either way, whether you're at the bottom of the pit or whether you're in the cube, that's not going to be a great solution, because either they're going to kill the gelatinous cube and then it will fall on you at the bottom of the pit, or they'll kill the gelatinous cube and you and it will fall to the bottom of the pit. So it's a nasty little trap.
Dang. Have you unleashed this on like a lot of parties, or was this one that you designed that you haven't used a lot?
Well, it was in an old second edition adventure called The Labyrinth of Madness.
Ooh.
And the design goal behind The Labyrinth of Madness was to make like the most, or one of the most difficult dungeons ever.
Cool.
And so and I play tested it, and yes, that trap had wondrous effects on the party in that it worked like a charm.
Awesome. Who did we summon who fell into our new trap? Why, it's a Tom Lommel.
Gelatinous cubes?
Yes. Hello. I'm going to leave you.
Hey, Tom.
Hi. I had you on mute, so I have no idea what the last question was about, but I would like to do a dramatic reenactment of what I saw.
Highly accurate. Yep.
That's pretty accurate. That works. That works.
It's a little piece I call "A Mimic is a Trap and a Monster."
So. You're very close. It was a trap with a gelatinous cube in it.
Okay, very good.
Tom, I'm going to turn you over to Darcy so that you can spell me for a bit from this AMA, because I'm into hour 3.
Yes.
But I'm gonna come back with a question for you when you are done. So don't go anywhere.
I'm ready.
I'm back. Okay. Get excited. Hi, Tom. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Why don't we what are your most recent plugs? So you're an actor. You have done kind of a YouTube sensation. You are full of advice for game masters and players. Your advice, certain flavors of your advice, I would recommend people take more than others. Do you want to tell people what you're most proud of that they should know about, and that they should immediately go follow you on all the things?
Immediately go follow me. Well, so about 5 or 6 years ago, I created a web series called Dungeon Bastard, which was a very satirical, kind of like this overblown, full of himself, kind of grognardy kind of guy who was going to tell everybody the right way to play D&D, right? And so I did a web series on that, and that's kind of like, I still run the Twitter account for it. We're not creating any new content for it, but if people want to find me and ask me RPG questions or whatnot, or find out what I'm up to on the tabletop side of things, that's the place that I direct them to. My main outlet right now is streaming. So I run a D&D game almost every Wednesday night. We're going to do our season finale actually this Wednesday over on a channel called Saving Throw Show.
Yes.
So if you go to twitch.tv/Saving Throw Show, you can watch me play D&D. But then also Tuesdays before the game, I do a GM kind of like advice, philosophy, issues kind of thing, where I talk about, okay, so based on what happened last week in the game, here's where things are at, here's what I'm thinking about, here's what I want to try and tie together. These are the elements that I need to consider. And so that's more of a GM kind of philosophy kind of thing. Not so much like I advertise it as a GM prep show, but it's not like, well, help me with these statistics. It's not that. It's more like kind of like, how am I organizing the issues in the campaign and making sure that everybody gets the spotlight, and what came up last session that I want to reincorporate this session. So it's more of kind of a GM philosophy kind of thing than it is a prep show per se.
Yeah, kind of peeling back that curtain. I love that you tie that with the show you're actually running, so you can kind of see it in practice.
Yeah, yeah. And then if we have like an open week, 2 weeks ago was Gen Con, then I'll try and bring in a special guest. So I brought in Jay Africa, who is a longtime Adventures League DM and organizer and author. And we just spent 2 hours talking about like running games at a con and how you prep them and how it's different running a con game versus your ongoing campaign. And then at one point we just got out, like he got out his DM kit. This is what I bring to the table when I go GM at a con. And I'm like, well, here's what I bring every week. And we kind of nerded out that way. So it's a little bit of everything there. But yeah, it's fun. I like, the way that I met Monty was I volunteered on his forums back when he was running Malhavoc Press.
What?
And
cool.
Yeah. And so the way that I first got involved was I was just a participant in the forum that was dedicated to Return to the Temple of Elemental Evil, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all the GMs would get together and we'd trade advice and tips and not just like how to make the adventure more mean, but how to make, things work, well, how do we keep Hedrak from TPKing everybody in the party? Well, okay, we're all at different stages of running it. And it was this great hive mind that came together, and it was so supportive and wonderful. And like through that experience, I became a mod on the forums, and that's really how I got to know Monty. And so kind of the community, outreach, let's all support each other kind of thing is really sort of the angle that I've come at it from a while. And to be honest, that's kind of like why I let some of the Dungeon Bastard kind of stuff fade into the background in the past couple of years, because satire is a really tricky thing to do on the internet. And there's a point where you begin to cross over and people either don't get it or they want to celebrate the thing that you're trying to make fun of.
Trying to satirize, yeah.
So
awesome. Oh man, go check out all of those things. I posted a bunch of links in chat. That's sweet. Okay, so we have, with all your experience that you are going to bring to your best game ever, first of all, thank you so much for being a consulting expert, for having a chance to share your top advice to players and GMs of any system. I think it is 100% a better project because you are on it. Thank you. But let's put you on the hot seat. Okay, so we have a question about player character death or even like players switching characters during a story. Do you have any thoughts about how you can, advice for how to kind of seamlessly bring them into the existing story? Whether how can someone bring a character in and not make it feel awkward, or at least minimize the amount of time it's sort of clunky?
Weird and artificial, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a couple different strategies. I think a big part of any group, regardless of whether you're all starting the campaign together, like right off the bat, or you're bringing somebody new in, is to establish relationships between the characters.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, like the best way I've found to do that is to run a session 0. And what I love to do is whatever system I'm playing, I play the session 0 in something else, like so that we're not worried about like, oh, these are what my stats are going to be, and these are all the cool abilities that I'm going to have. And I'll often do like a big time jump, right? So if I do a session 0, I'll maybe play let's play everybody as teenagers in this village, and you're get cursed by whatever, and then we play a totally different system. And then when we pick up the game, we'll start like, okay, it's 5 years later, and now we're playing, the Cypher system or whatever, and now we can worry about nailing down your stats, so that you actually care, and we can kind of brush over anything that was like, oh yeah, you got shot in the arm by that arrow, like maybe you don't have as high strength as you think you should, or whatever it is, right? So that's what I'll do to establish relationships and really get kind of people for a feel for their characters when I'm starting out a game. Now, if I have to bring a new character in, I haven't always been successful at that, right? But I will say that like what I try to do is I try to incorporate them as an NPC or somehow hook them into the existing storyline so that they have a reason to be related to the characters or be interested in what the existing party is doing, right? So for instance, maybe the group has been trying to track down this giant who got lost in the woods and is searching for his axe. Well, if somebody dies, I can bring that character in as that giant. Why not like make them that character and give them some backstory that kind of brings them up to speed, but now they have a relationship together.
Yeah.
In my recent campaign online, I did one of the characters was tasked by their goddess to take this egg and throw it into the sea, and we had to switch characters, and so the new character sprung out of that egg.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. So those are the things I try to do. I think the other piece of advice that I think is really important is that it's not just the GM's job to think about that. And sometimes it's easy as the GM to like, oh, I'm responsible to create everything. It's my domain is the world, and the player characters have their little silos that they live in, and never the twain shall meet, right?
Yeah.
But I really am a big believer in like, let's cross over that divide and let's work together to like share the fiction and create together so that we're both invested in it, rather than just you get to experience my world. I think that's kind of an old school attitude that doesn't play very well. So introducing a new character, like reach out to that player and say, here's what I'm thinking, but what do you have? What have you got cooking? Here's what the situation is. Do you see how you could tie in?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I think one thing Monty said a lot about your best game ever, just in general, is emphasizing like, the fun at the table and the work that can be done in it is really everybody's a player. The GM is a player. That should be distributed, right? And there are things you can do as a player. So I'm really excited that you're coming in with that perspective with like some really concrete ideas about that too. That's awesome.
Well, and I really feel like there was when the hobby started, the old school D&D, you had your DM screen and you had all of the notes, and there was a big thing in the adventure that's like, if you're a player, do not read beyond this point, you're ruining everything. And it created this dynamic, like this power imbalance.
Yeah.
That unfortunately, I feel like we're getting away from finally, where it's not me and my secrets, it's our game that we're playing together.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. I have many more questions for you, but I know Monty has a question for you too. So I think I will relinquish you if from my grasp, if Monty is there.
Yeah.
Knock 3 times. Oh, goodbye.
It's hour 3. I'm getting a little punchy.
Oh my goodness.
All right. So Tommy, you and I go way back.
Yes.
Like you already talked about that, and I just wanted to say I'm really thrilled that you're a part of this project. I think that you've got a lot of great insights on gaming, and I'm happy that they will become a part of this book. Here's my question for you.
I appreciate being invited. It's great to work with you. I'm always happy to help you out however I can.
Cool. Here's my question. So here's the scenario. There's somebody who's never run a game before in their life, and they're walking into the room. The players are already in there. They're at the table. They turn to you. You're standing there right outside the room, and they say, what should I do? What's the advice that you can give me? You've only got like a short amount of time. What's the best piece of advice that you can give that person brand new at GMing?
I would say what you have is enough, right? Your ideas are enough. And if you listen, if you give them the premise and you listen to what they hook into, then it's just a process of building off of that. Like, I think, my wife has commented that since I've started streaming, I really try and kind of control the table a lot more than maybe I did in my home game, because I'm trying to fill dead air and things like that.
Right.
But when you're at the table with your players and you're not, like Tanya said, you're not streaming for entertainment, you're just entertaining each other.
Right.
The players take so much weight off of you. They give you the time to kind of like process while they're processing ideas. And in fact, you can steal their ideas and incorporate them into what's going on. And if you give them a slight twist, it's the most magical moment, because the one thing that I've learned is like players love to be challenged, but they also love to figure things out.
Yes.
They want to know, like, okay, well, well, who's, where is the magic sword that we're questing for? What do we have to do to get that thing? Or who murdered the mayor or whatever it is? They want to be right. Like, that's what they want. They want to struggle to get there. I remember I remember talking to you at one point, and you said that the brilliance of the level system is that it's almost just like a little psychological trick, right? Like you struggle, you press that bar like that mouse in the maze, and then boop, that little level pellet comes out, and you're like, I get to level up my character. Let's keep playing, right? Like, if you understand that, you understand how to GM. So, it's just kind of psychology 101. So you give them a little challenge. So what you come in with, they're going to hook on to, and if you feel like things are slack, you have time to process what's happening. So it's less work than you think it is. The other thing, I've given this is a really long-winded, terrible advice. So I hope no new GMs are listening to this. But I will say the reason that I GM is because I get to be everyone else in the world, right? Like, I have fun playing and being a character, but when I'm in the GM, I'm all the other characters.
Right.
And the real topper is, if I think of something cool, it just happens. I don't have to roll dice. I don't have to
right.
number. I don't have to ask the GM, like, does this make sense? Like, no, I'm the GM. I decide that it makes sense and it happens. So that's the fun part of GMing. I think people get intimidated, like, oh, like you said earlier, like, it has to be a real world. Why play in the real world is pretty terrible right now. Let's play in a world of, epic fantasy or superheroes, like fighting for a just cause, or let's make the world bigger and more fantastic. You're entering into a realm of imagination. Like, let's engage with it.
I like those bits of advice because they boil down to, hey, it's going to be fun and you got this. Yes. Right. And that's awesome. I think that's great. And I really like that approach. I think that that's the kind of thing that every first time GM needs to hear.
Yeah. You're going to have stage fright, right? You're going to have stage fright. Your friends are there to have fun with you. So don't try and let go of that piece of it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not as much pressure on you as you think there is, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you so much, Tom. Really appreciate you jumping in and taking on some questions, and really appreciate you being a part of this project. I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to be better because you're a part of it.
I'm pumped to be a part of it. Yeah, I'm pumped to see what all comes up with all the I really love the idea that the Cypher system is getting like individual books for science fiction, and it looks like maybe fantasy or whatever. Like, I'm excited to see that stuff expand. So yeah,
cool. Yeah, us too.
Thank you, Tom. That was great.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, talk to you later.
Bye.
So good. The rallying cry of chat is, you are enough. What you have is enough. That's yeah, I think that's a great thing to remind ourselves.
Doesn't everyone just need to DM or not, right?
Yeah, great point.
Needs to hear that.
Yeah, I want that like needle point, cross stitched up on my wall. You are enough. It's gonna be okay. That's awesome. Okay, we are dwindling down to our last few questions. I don't know if you have my notes in front of you. I might even allow you to choose one of your favorite questions if you're afraid I won't get to it.
Okay.
But one I'll start with you is one that I struggle with, because I'm always the person who's like, oh, we can squeeze like one more person in even when we really can't, right? I'm always like, oh, just come. I always want to include that one extra player, that one extra person at the event, to a detriment. So do you have any advice for like GMing or, maybe even players, like how to manage a big party when you have like a big group? What's your top advice for making that go smoothly?
So I'm going to start my answer with a gaming story that I love. And it's not my story, but it's a story that I heard. So forever ago, like when I was getting started in the industry, there was an event at an Origins convention. And it was a Call of Cthulhu game. And, so somebody had said, when they were asked how many players, when the GM was asked how many players should come to this event, the convention, he said 6, right? Because that's pretty typical. Well, this was in the early days of using software to actually manage all of this stuff, and apparently someone had put in had held down the 6 key for too long.
What?
Right. And so I actually don't know if that ended up being 66 or 666. Right. But the point is that the automated system just kept letting people sign up.
Oh God.
Right. So this guy goes to run his Call of Cthulhu game and, sits down and people just start swarming in. Right. I mean, there's just 50 people who have signed up for this game and they all want in. And the great part about the story is that the GM didn't miss a beat. He just said, okay. And he just said, okay, so here's the situation. And he's talking to 50 people instead of 6, right? And he's just here's the situation. And, 2 minutes into it, Cthulhu shows up, right?
Yeah.
And just kills 20 people, right? And then 2 minutes later, then Nyarlathotep shows up and kills 30 people, right? And so it whittles it down so that there's only 6 players left.
Oh my
and then
gosh.
Starts the game, right? But so what a great way to roll with the punches. And I mean, those people didn't get to play the game that they signed up for, but they got
weren't going to.
Yeah. Right? And they certainly got a great gaming story that I'm telling 30 years later. Right? So, but anyway, that's what whenever somebody talks about big groups, that's the thing that always comes to mind. But actually, to the advice, so I think large groups don't be misled into thinking that large groups aren't harder on the GM, because they are, right? And that doesn't mean don't do it, but it does mean that it's more work for the GM because, keeping everybody engaged, making sure that everyone has something to do, making sure that, everyone is getting sort of their time in the spotlight is, if there's 6 players, then everybody gets 1/6. If there's 10 players, everyone gets 1/10 of the time. And making sure that everyone is still happy and having a good time is harder. And I'm going to go all the way back to a couple of the first answers that we were talking about, right? Where I think it behooves the players in a large group to be more sort of aware of the challenges that face the group and be even more sort of taking on the responsibilities of making sure that everything is working smoothly and everyone is having a good time, because it's so easy. If there's 8 people sitting around the table, it's really easy for one of them to start to kind of feel like the person on the edge, on the periphery, right? And so make sure you're bringing them back in, and everyone is a part of that. I think is a really good way to go. There are other strategies too. If you've got a group, if you really want to have, let's say, 6 players, but you've got 7 people who want to play, there are things that you can do, like have one player sort of be co-GM, right? Have that person, especially if you've got somebody who's really a rules person, right? Have them just sort of be the rules arbiter of the table, and have them, and I don't mean relegate them to some minor thing. I mean have that and then make that an important role that makes everybody's life that much easier, because they're the one, who are looking up the rules or whatever it is that they're doing, and it frees up the GM to just focus entirely on the story. Right. You can go all the way down that path and actually have co-GMs, right? And have 2 people who are taking on the roles and trading off back and forth with those kinds of things. But that's sort of a whole nother thing that we could talk about. But the point is that there are various roles that you can play around the table that maybe don't mean actually adding another character to the group.
Yeah. Oh, I like that a lot. And co-GMing's, something that near and dear to my heart that I always talk about. So, but I think that's a lot of really good advice. Okay, I'm going to cheat for one question because we're getting near the end here of questions we can do, unless people find share this Kickstarter with some more people and get us some more backers. So we're going to do like a rapid round. So dark or milk chocolate?
When I was a kid, I would not even consider eating dark chocolate, but now I've kind of grown to love it.
Ooh.
But I still prefer milk.
Okay, excellent. Allegations, circulate that you are in fact a wizard. What do you have to say about this? Straight from the mouth of Monte. Are you a wizard or not?
Well, look at all these books of spells and the occult and stuff that I have. I must be a wizard.
You're definitely in the wizard's tower right now. All right. That answers my question. That answers it for me. Too sufficient. Right. And what is the curse you laid on Bruce 40 years ago, such that his dice are doomed to roll poorly?
I'm not that old. It was 35 years ago that Bruce and I started playing together. I don't know. The thing is that my memory of playing with Bruce a long time ago, I don't remember him always rolling poorly when he was young. But certainly I would say, like, in the last 10 years, he has definitely developed the reputation of, starting out every session rolling a 1. It kind of doesn't, regardless of the game system we're playing, right? We just assume he's going to roll a 1.
Oh, man. He was on fire in our recent Numenera game, I think. It was at the Invisible Sun live show. He was rolling really well, and it was very suspicious.
It wasn't really Bruce.
Yes. It was a homunculus all along. All right. So we're into the 2 final questions. I'm going to ask one, and then I have another one lined up. But if there's one you're kind of dying to answer, you should pipe in. So this is a tough one. But have you ever had to ask someone to leave your gaming group? Do you have any insight for people who might be in that situation?
I have had to do that, and I have done it very poorly, and I've done it okay. And I'm not actually even sure that there's a better way to do it than just okay, right? Because that's probably one of the hardest things that can happen in a game. And it's just so the terrible way that I did it was we just told that guy, oh yeah, we're not gonna, our schedules are too busy, we're not playing anymore, right? And then of course we kept playing just without that person, and that's crappy, right? I was much younger and
non-confrontational.
Yeah, I was just afraid of the confrontation and whatnot. But the other time that I've had to do that, it was, I was just a lot more honest about it, and I think I was a little more mature and had sort of realized, not every game, not every group is right for every gamer. And if you've got someone in your group who isn't fitting well, it's not just bad for you, or not just bad for the group, it's bad for them too, right?
Right.
And so there are, asking them to leave is that sort of step 4, right? There are steps that you should try to get there before that, right? Try to identify what it is that they're doing that isn't really fitting, and figure out why they're doing that, and see if there's ways around it.
Yeah.
Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? But if you actually have to get to the point where you have to ask somebody to leave, just say to them, this isn't working out. Maybe you want to try a different group. Maybe, we'll if like the person's like super into combat, but this isn't a really combat heavy game, maybe you can say, hey, in a couple of months we're going to start up a new campaign, and it's going to be a dungeon crawl D&D campaign, and you probably fit in a lot better there. Maybe you can try and come back then, or whatever, right? But just explain that it's just not a good fit, right? it's crazy, like breaking up with someone,
Yeah.
right? And you just have to kind of bite the bullet and do it.
Yeah.
And be as kind and gentle as you can.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of be as encouraging as you can for them to go out and find a group that will make them happier. But
Mm-hmm.
I think you just have to do it, right? Just gotta adult up and do it.
Yeah. One thing I really appreciated of the article you wrote about kind of talking to players who and coming to terms with players who want to tell other players like how to run their character, right? And one thing that I think like I'm really excited for your best game ever is that a lot of times when you find when this question gets asked a lot, right? Like there's a player who's causing problems in my group. What do I do? And you get like 50 comments that are like, tell them to leave. But like that's that's not being fair to what a complex problem that is. And
You're absolutely right.
And what I appreciate is that I'm going to post the link here, but like I'm excited that this is going to be a book that doesn't just say, like, tell that person to leave your group. It talks about, you in the article you like gave kind of example phrases, right? Like kind of how to couch it, like, and especially for when I was a first time GM and, man, it took me a long time to get the confidence and to have the tools and those kinds of phrases that sort of validate that person and, learn how to say, here's what you're really good at, but that's not a good fit here. Like that's a tool that this book is going to teach someone to use immediately, as opposed to having to do it wrong a bunch of times and then learn it eventually, right? So I just wanted to say that like that kind of actionable, here are words you should think about, using in this conversation to make it go easier is like dear to me.
Yeah. I think that one of the things that you can do so that you don't ever find yourself in that situation is, and this isn't a perfect solution, right? But like a long time ago, one of the realizations that I had as a gamer was don't invite someone to game with you that you wouldn't enjoy doing something else with for a whole evening, right? So, if it's someone who you wouldn't go out and have dinner with, you probably don't want to game with them, right? Because gaming's a huge time commitment. It's all interpersonal interaction. So you got to like the people, and you got to be at least a little bit compatible with them. And so, but I hear stories about people who are just like, well, we really wanted an extra person for our game and they had played before, so we invited them and
bring a new gamer. Convert someone. Lure them in.
Man, do I agree with that, right? If you can't find other gamers, make them, right?
Yeah.
Teach people how to play the game.
Yeah. Oh man. And I've always been delighted to find out how many people, when asked, how surprised I can be that people who I wasn't sure if they'd be on board with trying out a role-playing game, even my optimism has been surpassed with how many people, if you think about a couple, pitch a game that they might like, right? People are, it's a renaissance for gaming right now. So give it a shot, right? Go try to convert that friend you really like or that acquaintance you like to spend more time with. Make them a gamer and force them to spend time with you. Darcy's advice.
Man, I'm not the first person to say this, but it is so different today in 2018 than it was in, when I was first starting out in the late 70s, early 80s, where, getting someone to join in your group, it was scary because you were asking them to do this thing and it was weird. You had to convince them it wasn't weird. And nowadays, we live in an extremely geeky culture, right? Mm-hmm. And nowadays it's, even if someone hasn't gamed before, the concepts involved aren't utterly alien to them the way they were 40 years ago.
Oh man. All right. We got two last. Oh yeah.
I was going to say the same thing that you did. I'm watching the Kickstarter.
Yes.
And you just got 2 backers. So
Okay.
that's 2 more questions.
Good, because I'm so excited. Okay. Let's do it fast in case someone drops their pledge, which I would be very sad at. So thank you for joining us. Please don't drop your pledge, because I want to I have a question that I want to be the last question. So I'm like, just stay, only grow or stay. Okay. So for games that have horrific elements, how can you maintain a scary atmosphere if you have different players with different comfort levels?
So I think that's tough. That's a really good question. I think that, in anything that is sort of controversial, edgy, whatever you want to call it, right? Whether you're talking about, horror, violence, sex, you kind of have to go with the lowest common denominator. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way. I just mean like if you're playing a horror game, you're playing Call of Cthulhu, but you've got a player who can kind of only handle this level of gruesome violence and horror, then you can really only go that far, right? Even if everyone else at the table can handle it, you don't want to alienate that one person just because they have a different sensibility. And so, since the question specifically about horror, I'll keep using that as an example. I think that there are ways that you can do it, and in fact, sometimes horror can be more horrific by not describing things as detailed as you might think, as you might normally want to. And the nice thing there is, if you've got somebody who's like, oh yeah, I watch horror movies all the time, and and really into the gruesome horror stuff, they will picture things in their mind and it will be horrible, right? And to whatever level they want it to be. And then the person who's like, I'm not really into that, if you haven't gone into great detail, but you've kind of talked in general terms, then they're not going to have to think about something that they don't want.
But you let that fester in the imagination of the person who will. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's great. And yeah, I think that being respectful of the limits is super important as a group, especially in horror. It's just nice to
and it becomes really, really important, like when you start dealing with, like, if you've got a group where one of the players is a kid, right, that becomes probably even doubly important to figure out where the limits are because of that player, and then don't go past them regardless of who the other players are, and everyone will be understanding. You can even talk to the group about it, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, another question. And this is kind of open-ended, but I bet you have an interesting nugget to share. So one of the backers, Eric, asked, for Numenera, how did you approach like naming conventions, pronunciation? And you and Shauna had a really cool discussion when you're world building kind of creative space talk, that talking about the language of a place. And so do you want to talk, give people a little advice about how you built that, or how you approach it?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question to phrase that way, because Numenera is weird in that way. And Numenera is weird, but I mean, Numenera is weird in that way in particular. Like, if I was going to look at something else that I created, like Talus or the Diamond Throne World of Arcana Evolved, or things like that, I love world building, I love language, and so it became really important to me to create like naming conventions that made sense, right? So that my goal always was that if I could just tell you the name of something and you were a player in the game, you would know, oh, that's Elvish, right?
Yeah.
Or that's clearly a dwarf place, or whatever, right? That was always important to me. And so I would work on that, and when those became published products, I would even put in there, here's a bunch of Elvish names, here's a bunch of Laturian names, or whatever. But Numenera is a different beast altogether, right? Because one of the conceits of Numenera is that there isn't sort of a single homogeneous sort of culture that pervades. In fact, it's the opposite of that, right? Numenera is this very isolated culture where you've got these people living in this little aldea, and they might never have, well, maybe not never, but they very rarely have contact with anyone from anywhere else. And so they develop their own little naming conventions and maybe their own language. And so Numenera is intentionally kind of a hodgepodge of different names and naming conventions and cultural aspects like that. I mean, what I will sometimes try to do is make it so that the people in one place will have, kind of similar sounding names, or you can kind of see the through line there, but then, you're off to the next place and everything is new again, right? So that's kind of the thing behind Numenera, is that there isn't a thing behind Numenera in that way.
Yeah, and I'm sure you had to keep intentionally breaking that, right? Anytime you saw through lines kind of starting.
Coming up with some new naming convention. Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, sounds pretty exhausting, but so worth it. Okay, I think we are on a final question. So, and I'm hoping this one kind of touches a number of questions that we weren't able to get to, which is about your creative process. Could you give us a little bit of an overview of how you work, and whether, and I would leave it up to you of what you're most excited to talk about, whether that's sort of the trappings of it or whether it's a process that you want to share. But what are you most excited to share as we unveil a little bit of how you creatively produce?
Okay. So this is an interesting thing because this is something that I love to talk to other creators about, because everybody's different.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will literally figure out the scope of whatever it is that they're working on, and if they've got 3 months to do it, they will divide that up into 90 parts and figure out a schedule for themselves and go from there, and that's great. That is not really the way I work, not entirely anyway, because I need a ramp up period into whatever it is that I'm working on, and it's usually kind of what's the word I'm trying to think of? The bigger the project, the longer ramp up period. And so and what I mean by a ramp up period is just kind of thinking about things and looking at art to get inspiration and looking at similar works and whatnot. And, it's funny because, to someone who's not a writer, if I'm sitting at the keyboard typing away, I can say, oh, I'm working, and it looks like I'm working, and they can sort of understand that. But if I'm just sitting on the couch and I'm looking at an art book and I'm, maybe jotting down a note or two and just kind of, go for a walk, if you're not a writer and oh, I'm working, they're gonna be like, no, you're not, right? But that is a critical part of my work, right? Is just kind of sitting and thinking about it. And I get a lot of inspiration from art. I like, if there is something that is similar that's out there, I like to expose myself to it, not so that I can steal those ideas, but just kind of immerse myself into that kind of thinking, right? And so when people come to me and they ask me, what are the inspirations behind Numenera, I have a whole list of things, and some of them are going to be fictional works and some of them are going to be artists and whatnot, because those are literally the people and the books and the art that I was referencing at the beginning in this sort of ramp up period.
Oh, cool.
And then after that, it's a matter of sitting down and doing the work and writing. And I write at night mostly, although sometimes that changes, but I'm a night owl. I stay up really late. I get most of my writing done at night, and then I sleep late unless I'm having weird insomnia issues. And I love I love to immerse myself in whatever it is that I'm creating. That's why, I joked about with the wizard question about all the books that I have here, right? Um, and each one of these books has had an influence. This is specifically for Invisible Sun, and I'm now working on sort of some of the follow-up products for Invisible Sun now, and so I'm still kind of immersed in that, and that's what I'm working on at the moment, and so that's what I'm surrounding myself with. But I've got a Numenera shelf, right? That used to be like right there next to me, but I haven't been working on Numenera in the last little bit, so I moved that. But when I'm back to working on Numenera again, I will bring that back so that I can, continue to immerse myself in that. And then, as you pointed out, I love language, I love words. So I have, a big shelf here of books that are just about words. I love like the Describer's Dictionary. I use that a lot. The Reverse Dictionary, I use that a lot. Then I have a bunch of like obscure word books, like one that I've been using a lot lately, which here it is this one. It is the Superior Person's book of words, and it is as pretentious as it sounds.
Oh my gosh!
But in kind of a tongue-in-cheek sort of way. But it has a lot. The point of it is, why use these simple words when you can use these big, long, flourishing words, right?
Multisyllabic, yeah.
That exactly, and I like that, not because I just want to use big words and sound smart, but I'm a big believer that words, when you're reading, the actual words themselves carry a certain amount of weight, and so there's a difference between referring to something as gray or referring to something as funereal, right?
Yeah.
And so you don't say funereal because you just want to sound smart, but you want to use it because that's a great one, right? Because it really conveys a mood, and it's got a gloomy funeral kind of aspect to it, and so I love that kind of thing, and I love using that in what I'm writing, whether it be games or fiction or whatever, and so that's a big part of my process. I'm always I'm always looking at these books and looking for inspiration. Great for names. And that comes from there's a great tradition of that in gaming, actually. If you look back at a lot of Gygax's early stuff, I mean, Gygax, well known for a really big vocabulary and using a lot of, Gygaxian words. I mean, we talk about that as far as that, but a lot of the, like, if you read an old adventure module, a lot of the characters that come with it, like the pre-generated characters, they all have names which actually are archaic words, right? So they sound weird, like Funkin and Hottie Peak, but actually Funkin and Hottie Peak are two old English words, right?
Whoa.
And they have meanings, and so that's really cool.
Awesome.
And so I love words, and I don't know if I have anything more to talk about as far as process goes. That might kind of
yeah. I think that's insightful. That's helpful for me. Thank you. Awesome. Okay, so that was our last question. Thank you, everybody, so much for helping, for sharing the Kickstarter. I think. Yeah, exactly. 3 hours. Oh gosh. So end plugs. Someone had asked, what is Callisto 6? So that is something I wanted to let you guys know. If you haven't heard of it yet, it's going to be a Geek and Sundry show using the Cypher system. We're so excited. Run by Eric Campbell, who did a really great Star Trek show on Geek and Sundry before, and Callisto 6 is going to be, Monty knows lots more than I do about it, as he's been sort of behind the scenes, but it's going to be a superhero / kind of cyberpunk custom world. It's got beautiful art for it already. I'm dropping a link in the chat of some of what's been revealed so far. But we are really excited for that. That's going to happen Friday. And so hopefully that will bring some new people into, checking out the Cypher system and learning about your best game ever. So get excited for that. And I'm excited to meet new people through that. Should be great. So that will happen at 4 p.m. Pacific on Friday, and it will continue on Fridays in that time slot. And afterwards, right after that show this Friday is going to be The Truth Bleeds at Twilight, sort of number 2 of our new actual play run by some great fans of Invisible Sun. So tune in there. And we've, of course, still got our ongoing Numenera games and other great Twitch events you'll want to keep in your mind. So go follow us on Twitch and let us know what you love and what you want to see more of. But I think my final plug is Your Best Game Ever Kickstarter is almost over. So we still haven't seen, all it can do yet. I'm really excited to see where it goes. It's funded a bunch of great stretch goals like a Your Best Game Ever video series, which I'm really, obviously, I love doing this. We love having people on to sort of ramble and get to those nuggets of beautiful moments that just don't happen if I was, alone typing away. So I love that this is both going to be a really cool book with a video series. That makes me very happy. And we're currently working on our stretch goal right now is to beef up the Stars Are Fire, the really cool supplement. No, we hit that one.
We're past that one. We are on to Cypher System character portfolios, which will be really cool. A really great way to record your character, more than just character sheets, right? They are full, like, little booklets. Lots and lots of room to record your character's exploits and all the things you want to remember and all your stuff and your incredibly detailed backstory.
I love those. We've made them for Numenera, and so I'm really, really excited. And the first time I brought them out to my players, like, the jaws were on the floor, right? Everyone was very grabby hands, and you immediately saw how they were all using them differently and note taking differently. So I'm very excited for those portfolios. Yeah,
me too. It's something that Cypher System fans have asked for since we did those Numenera ones, and the Numenera ones. I created with Bear Whiter, who's our art director and layout artist, and we'll do the same with these, and they'll be beautiful.
Awesome. There's some love in chat for Cypher portfolios, so thank you so much. But I think I am forced to let you go back to your life outside of the AMA-a-thon, Monte. Thank you so much for putting up with me, and thanks everybody for sharing the Kickstarter, for being here, for enjoying our awesome guests. This has been really fun.
I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating when I say my mouth is actually tired from talking.
Yep, my face is tired from smiling. That's a good problem to have, though.
Yeah.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much. This has been lovely, and see you on the other side.
Bye.